the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's just after 6 o'clock on Saturday, February the 8th. I'm David Bull. Thank you very much for your company. This is Weekend Breakfast. Great news, as you would expect from me, and Weekend Breakfast, of course. It's Global Movie Day today. It's celebrated every year on the second Saturday of February during Oscar season. It encourages you to watch a movie, or as I like to call them, a film, because we are British. Also, you can enjoy a good old-fashioned celluloid story. Yes, it is Global Movie Day.
Ready, under lights, under action, under camera.
Well, quite right. Lights, camera action. Also today, it's International Scotch Day, a day celebrating Scotland's finest export. And did you know this? The origins of Scotch whisky actually date back to the 15th century, so bottoms up, I say. Is it too early for a Scotch? 6 a.m? Probably not. Also, it's Laugh and Get Rich Day today, a day where you can have a giggle and enjoy the many benefits that a good laugh can have on your health. Yes, it makes you happier, it lowers your stress level, it strengthens your immune system. It's Laugh and Get Rich Day today.
I know a laughing policeman. He's always on our street. And everybody says he is the happiest man in town.
Well, there you go. The laughing policeman. Right, let's start today's show, shall we?
Today's fascinating facts.
Well, today's fascinating facts, let's start with this one, shall we? On this day in 1836, the first London railway train ran from Spa Road to Deptford. There were fears that the great speed of 16 miles an hour would break passengers' necks. On this day in 1952, Princess Elizabeth formally proclaimed herself Queen and head of the Commonwealth and defender of the faith. Lords of the Council, numbering 150, representatives from the Commonwealth and officials from the City of London, including the Lord Mayor and other dignitaries, witnessed the accession of the deceased King's eldest daughter. And on this day in 1983, I remember this really vividly, weirdly. In 1983, Shergar, remember Shergar, the Aga Khan's Derby winner, was kidnapped from a stable in County Kildare in Ireland. The kidnappers demanded a ransom of £2 million, which was never paid. The horse was never seen again. And those are this hour's fascinating facts.
Weekend mornings we're taking flight. With David Bull, everything feels right. Weekend breakfast, shining like the sun.
Good morning. 5 minutes past 6 on Saturday, February the 8th. I'm David Bull. I've been glowered at from across the studio by a consultant psychiatrist who's thinking, well, you're clearly nuts. Dr. Raj Prasad, good morning to you. You were literally glowering at me.
Yeah, but that was because you gave me a strange look when I walked in.
I always give you a strange look.
Yeah, I know, that's true. This look, can I just explain? Because you gave it a very strange look, is what happens when you're stumbling around in the dark at 4 in the morning trying to dress without turning the lights on and waking up the wife. Right. And then you discover when you get downstairs you're wearing her clothes.
No, so you look
I thought you wouldn't like a cross-dressing psychiatrist.
I think you look like a teddy bear this morning.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, I think so. Sort of a teddy outfit. No tennis today?
No, I will be playing later on, of course.
Of course, yes. Outside?
No. Should see the size of my goosebumps. If it's
well,
outside.
everyone's seen your goosebumps. Right, shall we just talk about this? Laugh and Get Rich Day. Okay. I think the benefits of laughing and smiling, totally underestimated, actually. You must know from your background. I mean, it is really important for us to laugh.
Absolutely, and a sense of humour is very important. Back in the day where...
Shame you don't have one.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Very good.
Yeah. So, back in the day when there there were Lonely Hearts columns in newspapers before
when you wrote to them.
Before Tinder, that's right. GSOH, good sense of humour, was a key thing that people were looking for.
It is a key thing.
Yeah, but I find it interesting that psychiatrists, all the ones that I know, are very depressed-looking people. They hardly ever seem to crack a smile.
No, well, we were talking...
Is that your experience?
Oh, very much so. I was saying to you, actually, before we came on air, when I used to work in a psychiatric wing, I always thought everyone was so miserable, and that's a problem.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you've got to look like psychiatry works. You've got to look like... because
this is what the other side looks like.
So don't you think when you go and see a doctor, for example, you want them to look healthy? I mean, you look very fit. Don't take that the wrong way.
A lot of makeup.
But when you go and see a doctor, they look really unhappy and they look really unhealthy and so on. You think to yourself...
Feet up, smoking at the desk.
Yeah, cigars.
Cigars, yeah.
Bottle of whiskey on the desk, just like whiskey day.
Yeah, saying really obese, saying you need to cut down on what you're eating.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. So, you know, the way a doctor looks, I think, has a big impact on whether you're going to take their advice or not.
Well, I would agree with that. Also, of course, laughter is the best medicine. Of course, it releases all those endorphins, doesn't it? It actually changes your response to stress. I think your problems dissipate when you share them with other people, when you can laugh at the predicament you're in. It really is very important for us.
It's very important, not just in terms of the physiological impact of laughing, but people bond because they share a laugh together. So that's really important in terms of creating connections. But I'm going to bring this up very quickly, you know that in this very woke kind of world we live in, you're going to be afraid of causing offence. And if you're afraid of causing offence, you can't be funny.
No, you can't.
Because being funny is taking a risk, I think, all the time.
Well, you see, it's funny you should say that, because I work with lots of younger people, and I have to be careful what I say, which things that I consider to be funny may upset younger people who are all looking at me through the glass right now, thinking he's not funny.
I have the same problem.
Do you?
Yeah.
But that's because we're a similar sort of age, you see, so we are funny. And also the boundaries...
Also, we think making fun of people
is funny.
It's funny.
Well, it is. but you can't do that anymore.
No.
I would agree. I mean, I get the sense that actually the era of the woke era just maybe is starting to come to an end.
Well, we hope so. We hope so, certainly. But it makes it very difficult to have conversation, because conversation between two people should be something where you are able to take risks and say what you really 100%. Think. And now we're all being censored. It's like thought police. George Orwell, 1984, he foresaw all of this, actually. Yeah. You can't even think certain thoughts.
No, you can't. And he was right. Should we talk about what's going on in the papers this morning? Let me just start you with this one. This is going to make your jaws drop open this morning. This is the Daily Telegraph front page. Labour, David Lammy, that great foreign spokesman, of course, that great diplomat, David Lammy. Labour is going to open talks on slavery payouts. Apparently, the Foreign Office is going to open talks on slavery reparations with the Caribbean officials, who are demanding, wait for this, trillions of pounds from the United Kingdom. This is members of the Reparations Commission of the Caribbean Community, or CARICOM. This is a grouping of 15 states. They have long demanded reparation payments from the United Kingdom. They're planning to come to Britain in April. Now, what is interesting about this is that they have previously been rebuffed consistently by the previous Conservative government. David Lammy, oh, come on over, let's have a talk about trillions of pounds that we're going to pay to the Caribbean. I think it is worth remembering, just before you comment, we've got a clip of David Lammy from, I think, some years ago, 2020. David Lammy has been on record saying he is more Caribbean than British. Let's just see what he said in 2020.
I'm afraid, as Caribbean people, we are not going to forget our history. We don't just want to hear an apology, we want reparation.
Discuss.
Well, these things can come back to haunt you.
Can't they, David?
When you're in opposition, the kind of things you say to get attention and to criticise the government. And then you become the government and you realise maybe some of the things you said are going to land you in trouble slightly. But when they say they're going to open talks, this is an ancient British tactic where it looks like you're going to do a payout, but really all you're going to do is talk about doing a payout. That's not a bad strategy to get people to stop criticising you.
But the previous strategy was to say we're not having talks.
Yes, I know, but then that meant the other people never went away. They kept coming back again and again. So
no, but I think the whole problem has been that they've opened the door a little bit, and now the Caribbean community think, oh, hang on a minute, there's some cash in here for us.
Well, that's a good point. You opened the door a little bit by saying maybe there's something to discuss.
Yes.
Whereas when you rebuff them, you go, there's nothing to discuss. Right. It makes no sense. So it's nothing to do with us, what happened 200 years ago.
Well, I think it's basically emboldened the Caribbean nations to think, well, obviously we're pushing out the slightly ajar door, and essentially this is Miss Motley. This is Barbados's Prime Minister. Lovely, lovely country, Barbados. But she's basically saying, you owe us 3.9 trillion. The 2023 report put the figure owed to the former Caribbean colonies overall at 18 trillion. Oh, I'll tell you what, 20 billion black hole, then another 20 billion, then I'll tell you what, we'll pay the Chagos Islands 18 billion, and here we go, oh, well, I can trump that, 18 trillion.
But also, these numbers, we don't know how they calculate them, but why do they think Britain could afford that?
Well, they can't. I mean, it can't.
Well, I agree, but why pluck the figure from...
Because the door is ajar.
Oh, OK.
You see, so she's pushing at the door. I would have kept the door shut.
Yeah.
But also the conversation is much more complicated, isn't it, in terms of what the Foreign Office does. We'll talk about this later. But we have a huge partnership with the Caribbean as it is. It's a major, important partner for the United Kingdom. I was looking up exactly what we do. The UK Caribbean Infrastructure Fund, for example, which is 350 million quid we gave them from 2016 to 2026. The Caribbean Economic Development Programme, renewable energy and energy efficiency, also anti-corruption. The list goes on and on and on as to what we actually do in terms of the partnership with the Caribbean countries.
I agree, and some of this stuff can be a bit short-sighted. So, for example, the Caribbean obviously relies hugely on tourism. It's their number one industry, and a large number of the tourists that come there come from Britain.
Yes.
So if you annoy the British, maybe they'll stop going. You've got to see the after effects of some of this stuff. In the long run, is it bad for your economy, worse for your economy, to have alienated one of the major tourist groups that turn up all the time and spend money in your economy?
Yeah, I just don't quite know where this goes. I was just intrigued to see that Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, also has voiced his support for reparations. Whenever there's something odd going on, Lord Hermer seems to pop up, doesn't he?
Yeah, but again, it's about this idea that money solves everything. Money will fix everything, and it's a quick fix.
And obviously, as a result, Caribbean sources said they're keen for Lord Hermer to be involved in the meetings. I'm sure they are, as someone who has called for reparations. It is extraordinary, actually. Let me know your thoughts on that, please. I'm asking a question this morning. Has Labour, and I've been thinking about this for a while, has Labour got its spending priorities right? So we're talking about giving 18 billion quid to the Chagos Islands, apparently. Now we're talking about trillions of pounds going to the former Caribbean or Caribbean countries that were part of the Commonwealth. You know, I just wonder your thoughts of that as well. And whilst I'm on that matter, in terms of my ajar door, the African Union then thinking, well, hang on a minute, if the Caribbean are going to get this massive payout, then maybe the African countries should too.
But more intelligent response from our side, I think, given your very good point about leaving the door ajar or closing the door, is to point out, well, one of the things that's happening when local politicians do this is they're trying to draw attention away from their own problems, because the Caribbean has a lot of problems, and what those local politicians are responsible for. So it's a great political tactic to say, let's just look over there, and they will solve our problems because they'll give us billions of pounds, rather than fixing our local economy or fixing our own problems.
It's a brilliant point, actually. Raj, thank you very much for the moment. So, the question this morning, do you think Labour has its spending priorities right? Also, I'm going to be showing you the latest political polls. They make very interesting reading indeed. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
she is proposing a number of things. One, if you're jobless, you're low paid, you've been claiming benefits, then no, you can't settle indefinitely in the UK, and therefore you wouldn't be allowed to then claim citizenship. She's also saying if you've entered the country legally, you're only allowed to apply for indefinite leave to remain once you've been in the country for 10 years, not the current 5 years, and after that you have to wait another 5 years before you are allowed to attempt to apply for citizenship. I mean, I think most people would just be stunned to learn that you can be here for just 5 years.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. Oh, it's still crackling. Good morning, 6:18, Weekend Breakfast, Saturday, February the 8th. Dr. Raj is with me. This morning, lots of messages coming in this morning. The question is, how many people have we already offended? That's what I would like to know.
No.
Good morning, Dr. David and Dr. Raj. You both make me laugh and smile. This is Carolina in Bath. Good morning to you. Thank you very much. I come from a family with a sense of humour. Those with humour are becoming more and more rare, unfortunately. This government makes you want to cry and scream, especially Lammy with his reparations and the Shagos con job, etc., etc. I agree totally with that. Good morning to you, David and Raj, one of my favourite commentators on Talk.
Which one?
Really? I was going to say, what?
Which one?
David, don't worry too much about Starmer's obsession with giving away our money in reparations. For every time he mentions it, it pushes Nigel closer to number 10. So as far as I'm concerned, go Starmer. Best wishes, Nick Moore. Best wishes to you, and good morning to you, Nick. I'm asking this morning, do you think Labour has its spending priorities right? We keep hearing about this 20 billion hole. Then, of course, the changes in the budget, which adds another 20 billion to that. Then they're talking about, I tell you what, why don't we give 18 billion to the Shagos Islands, and whilst we're at it, trillions in reparations to the Caribbean countries. Oh, hang on a minute. What about actually paying to keep our pensioners warm over the winter? It feels to me that they have some very misguided priorities.
Especially with a very cold snap coming up at the minute.
-7.
There's a winter fuel allowance issue that seems to have gone away as a debate. But you can give sometimes money to people like the Chagos Islanders. If it's tied to the idea, they may spend it on your economy. If they buy British stuff, if they reconstruct the island, then, to some extent, if you tie it that way, it actually makes some kind of spending sense.
We're ceding sovereignty, obviously, and, the whole thing doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, but it could be thought through a bit more carefully, was what I'm trying to say. If you just hand money out, willy-nilly, rather than
Raj's note to government, think about things more carefully. Let's look at the front page of the Times.
Or just think.
Or just think, absolutely. Let's look at the front page of the Times this morning. Alarm over diversity push. This is on the back. I mean, it sort of feeds very nicely into what is going on in the United States. But the story this morning, as you are waking up, universities that fail to champion diversity face cuts to their research budgets under a funding plan that critics warn will put ideological conformity above academic excellence. This is about £2 billion worth of taxpayer funding, and the way it's allocated to academic research. Apparently, according to this, universities will have to show they are robustly tackling inequalities and promoting diversity and inclusion across all activities that they promote. They will have to demonstrate the percentage of black, Asian and mixed-race academics eligible for funding and provide evidence of the percentage of promotion success per underrepresented groups. I want the best people doing academic research. I don't care what colour you are.
I agree. There's a hidden agenda here, which is actually dismantle what a good university, is meant to be about, which is very high standards. And there's a word that's becoming very unpopular, which is the notion of an elite. An elite being people who are really, really very good at something. And as a result, people who are really bad at something get excluded. But what this is about is we'll dismantle the idea of standards and we'll let anyone become a neurosurgeon, you know, to balance up the quotas and balance up the numbers. I mean, one of the problems here is that, I mean, I went to university and I failed anatomy in the first year, and it was a good thing.
No,
I know
I
you
think
find it
it probably
surprising.
No, I don't find it. That's why you're a psychiatrist.
Yeah, what are they trying to tell me? I thought to myself. But anyway, the point is, high standards people fail, and a lot of people in this country don't seem to like that anymore, the idea of failing. They think that anyone should be allowed access to an elite institution. The whole point of an elite institution is it'll be horrible. Yeah, and it'll be tough, and a lot of people won't get in. So the people who aren't getting in or being excluded, we live in a society where everyone says everyone should have a bit of that pie over there. Whereas the whole point is, forget diversity, are you good enough, basically, to be there?
And this flies in the face of what else is going on. Let's just look at the detail here. This is Research Excellence Framework. So it basically determines the way that government funding is given to academic institutions. At the moment, it looks at three things. Research output, that seems a good thing to me. Research input, again, a good thing, and the environment that the university has in terms of supporting research. That seems to me a really good way to actually allocate that kind of cash. Essentially, they want to change this and replace it with a new people, culture and environment framework. So essentially skewing the parameters and the metrics by which they award that research money.
The other really dangerous thing about this, there are increasingly, unfortunately, very few things that we are world leaders at in this country. But in any ratings of the top 20 universities in the world, we have 5 or 6 usually, right?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing we should try to hang on to. And what will happen here is they will dismantle this excellence that we have, and we'll end up not being able to, for example, universities are an export industry. People come from all over the world to study here, and it's good for our foreign exchange. So this is monkeying around with one of the last few things we're good at worldwide.
And just let's, this is a great segue actually into the front page of the FT this morning. If you look halfway down, Accenture joins the rush to ditch diversity targets. Obviously this is on the back of Donald Trump in the United States. Accenture has scrapped its global diversity and inclusion goals after an evaluation of the US political landscape, becoming the latest big company to ditch its targets since the election of Donald Trump. They literally have done a handbrake turn. Chief Executive Julie Sweet said the New York-listed consulting group would begin, I love this phrase, sunsetting its diversity goals in 2017, sunsetting, as well as career development programs for people of specific demographic groups. This is completely different to what she said in 2020 when she talked about the importance of a diverse workplace, and she is committing to diversity. It's the right thing to do. Look, I think at the end of the day, of course, diversity is really important, isn't it? That people come together and you're all from different backgrounds and you learn and you grow together. But the point that you're making, and I think it is absolutely right, is if you are a leading institution or an academic institution, or indeed if you want to be a neurosurgeon, you want the best people.
But also she said we want a workplace that's diverse. I want a workplace that's competent.
So do I. That knows what it's doing.
Yeah, exactly. Because how many times do you wander into a workplace or call them up to try and get a service and they're basically incompetent? So she's lost track with what the fundamental thing is.
So there's something else really interesting going on here, because of course the DEI departments of many of these big companies are enormous and they've grown exponentially.
Yeah, it's a job creation exercise.
It absolutely is. And so when you look at what has happened since Trump made that decision, Accenture has 799,000 people around the world. They are joining Meta, McDonald's and Target. They have ditched DEI completely. Fascinating.
But in a globalised economy, we're competing with the South Koreans and the Taiwanese. Yes. I'm not convinced they're that preoccupied in South Korea or Taiwan with diversity. No. I don't think they're going around going, oh, I think we should have more British people working for us. So I think that we're going to lose out because the Taiwanese and the South Koreans understand the key thing is to do something really, really well. Forget the whole diversity thing. Well, we're competing with those people in a globalised economy.
Of course we are. Of course we are. And actually, in a multinational where you have multiple countries, by its very nature, you will get multiculturalism because you're based in different countries anyway. This also comes on the back of another story yesterday. You know, Rachel Reeves has said, oh, I'm going to crack down on stifling and unpredictable regulation. The City of London says, hang on a minute, get rid of DEI.
Absolutely, yeah.
So do you think that we're at that tipping point now?
Well, you obviously hope we are.
I do hope we are. I just want common sense.
Yeah, I think there's too much vested interest in this job creation exercise. There are too many people who get paid for the whole wokeism and the inclusivity thing to be just got rid of. They've almost become the establishment, I would say.
Well, I mean, it's fascinating that I think suddenly the city bosses have decided now is the time to put their head above the parapet. I know that many directors of these big organisations have had to pay lip service to DEI because it was what they had to do, but now they're saying, hang on a minute, the business is suffering. When you look at, let's talk about the NHS, just the number of DEI staff there, and of course you've got all of these great HR resource bodies that are sitting in there. How about actually putting money into patient care?
No, I agree. But going back to the companies thing, if a company can't survive, company survival is a crucial thing. If companies are folding up, why are we paying attention to diversity? We should be paying attention to growing the economy and having companies that survive.
Or growing your company.
But you're right, in the NHS, my experience when I used to work in it was that the HR departments had grown and were bloated and were full of people monitoring stuff that was very unclear had anything to do with patient care, I think.
I would agree. Loads of you getting in touch this morning. I'm asking, has Labour got its spending priorities right? This is based on the front page of The Telegraph this morning, if you are just joining us. Labour to open talks on slavery payouts. I'd like the Labour to open talks with the farmers, with business about national insurance contribution, employer national insurance contribution, with older people about how they're going to pay to keep their heating on. As we heard earlier, it's going to get to -7. But no, we're going to talk about slavery payouts. Let me know your thoughts, please. Has Labour got its spending priorities right? The number 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can also text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. This is a bit of a curveball. Good morning, David. Could you ask Raj, were you in the cinema last Monday watching The Apartment?
Yes, I was.
Yes, he asked everyone if he would like a coffee, except me. And I'm his biggest fan. Who's this?
I don't know. On a Monday at 1 p.m, Regent Street Cinema, the oldest cinema in the world, in North Regent Street, shows an old black and white movie. And they showed a very famous film called The Apartment with Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine. 1960 it was made.
Wow.
And I tend to book the second row, and all my friends turn up, and I offer them a coffee. Obviously, I missed someone.
And they're very upset. And they got up early just to say, where's my coffee?
Can I apologise?
Yes, you can.
Say, next month, I'm not actually there next Monday, but the Monday after, I will buy
Monday
them a
after, you've got coffee, GS. So there we are. Consider that's done. OK, let's... lots more messages coming in first. Good morning, says Terry from Scunthorpe. Good morning to you, Terry. Great show, thank you. Reform should approach Catherine Burble-Singh as their education spokesperson. I will pass that on. David, Labour
People may not know who she is.
Yes, do you want to explain?
She's a headmistress of a famous school.
Very famous school.
Yeah, because she actually bucked government regulation and decided to set up her own school.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing school. I've been there. I've given a talk. Yeah. They chant the famous poem by... Oh, God, I've forgotten it. But the If poem about, facing adversity, basically.
Amazing.
And it's amazing. It's a school where people queue up silently in the corridors. She generates incredible results, but it's a school full of discipline, basically. Very tough working environment. But she's gone back to old values, about education,
which is what
discipline.
we had when we were growing up.
But it's an amazing school and worth... I mean, she's a very...
I'd like to meet her, actually.
I've met her, yeah.
Well, of course you have.
But she's very scary.
I'm sure she is. That's why the kids are so well behaved. Loads of you getting in touch. John in Wallington, one of our regulars, good morning to you. David, Labour has billions of pounds to give away, it seems, but no money to help the elderly. I absolutely agree. No money to help the elderly. Keep warm. We need a leader like Donald Trump. I hope Reform win the next election. That's John in Wallington. Thank you. Labour, according to Mick, seems to be like a child who suddenly gains control of their parents' bank account. I would agree as well. David says, Mick, it seems we can look after the rest of the world, but not our OAPs and veterans. The optics of this are terrible.
No, I agree. We've got a lot of problems in the world, in our country. Let's focus on that, as opposed to a problem that occurred 200 years ago or a problem that's overseas.
So if you were to think about their priorities and what is actually going through their grey matter, what exactly is propelling them to look at foreign policy as opposed to looking after our domestic people?
Well, I don't think you have to be a psychiatrist to be really worried about the fact they're not focusing on domestic policy, because maybe they have no ideas and they have no optimism or no belief that they can actually solve the problem. They have no ideas. I mean, we have to go back to Mrs. Thatcher, who had a plan, who had ideas about what she was going to do. So maybe what's very worrying about this is they're running around looking for things that grab headlines as opposed to actually being effective in government.
So there's another story, actually, that obviously has resonance for the two of us. This is also the Daily Telegraph this morning. West Streeting, the NHS is too keen to hire migrants. West Streeting has attacked the NHS's reliance on foreign doctors, saying it's too willing to pull the immigration leader. So this is really interesting for lots of reasons. I got a message from someone yesterday talking about highly trained, highly educated medical graduates, British medical graduates, who can't get a job. And this backs this up. Two-thirds of the 28,564 medics registering to practice medicine in Britain last year qualified abroad, not in this country. The EEA, European Economic Area, remains largely stable, but the rest of the world, graduates from the rest of the world, has risen 400% over the same period. Now, we also know there are huge problems with some of those medical graduates coming in from abroad because they're not very safe. And also, why are we stigmatising medical graduates who qualified in this country, who are very bright, who should get a job?
So we've massively expanded medical education in this country. It's very expensive to train a doctor. I think it's something like £100,000 or something to train a doctor, because the course is expensive, it's long. And yet, I mean, when I was at medical school back in the 1980s...
1800s.
That's right. There was only 125 people in the year. Now, the same medical school has 400 people in the year. There's a question as whether they've over-expanded medical education, but you've got thousands of people being trained. Then they leave medicine because they're cheesed off with their experience of working in the NHS, and then we bring in these foreign graduates. And as a psychiatrist, the one thing you've got to be able to do is speak English, you'd have thought.
You'd have thought.
And I've worked with many people who've been brought in from overseas, no disrespect to them, who I couldn't understand what they were saying, and I was wondering how would the patients understand? Because they were basically just a warm body in a room. That's why they were hired.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a message from Diana Harding this morning. David, this is scandalous. In 2024, the UK graduated 9,285 doctors, registered 19,000 from abroad. Of the latter, 2,366 were from the EEA. The others were from IMGs, International Medical Graduates. They nicked them from countries like India, Pakistan, Nigeria, Bangladesh and Egypt. Actually, what those countries need is their own doctors.
And one of the reasons why they're coming over here is, as a doctor in the NHS, you earn more over here than you would earn back there, so that's why it's very attractive for them to come. But there's a real question about why are we spending so much money, taxpayers' money, training doctors and then not using them. Yeah.
But let's look at this. The proportion of UK-trained doctors joining the GMC register, so that is, as you know, when we graduate, you then have to be GMC certified, so the General Medical Council keeps a record of those people who are practising clinically. That has fallen from 56.2% to 32.5%.
The other big issue, and again, it's politically incorrect to say it, right? But to what extent do we know what the standard is when people were trained abroad? I mean, you're not really allowed to bring this point up.
Why not?
Because it's seen as discriminatory in some sense. But I'm very troubled by the standard of some of the doctors that I've met who've been trained abroad as to how do we know how good they are?
In what sense? Because of their linguistic skills, or because they don't know very much?
Linguistic skills, but also some of the way they practice seems frankly a bit weird. But the best example of this is the fake doctor in Scotland who passed herself off as a doctor. She wasn't a doctor at all. She faked a medical qualification from New Zealand. There were spelling mistakes on the photocopy that she sent to the General Medical Council, and they waved her through. And she wasn't a qualified doctor at all, had no medical qualifications.
So no checks.
Interestingly, though, a bit worrying as a psychiatrist, she used to practice successfully for over 10 years.
Shows what psychiatrists like.
But you know, the funny thing is, because I made an inquiry of the General Medical Council about this case because I was so interested in it, and a lot of patients had actually complained about her to the General Medical Council.
Right.
And the General Medical Council kept ignoring these patient complaints. So the patients had a sense there was something a bit weird going on. But none of her medical colleagues seemed to spot the fact that she wasn't actually a qualified psychiatrist.
How do you get away with that? But how do you get away with that? Because surely you need to know something.
Well,
don't you?
Well, that's why I'm so interested in the case. I think fake doctors raise a really interesting question about to what extent do we actually need medicine during the day? And I think the NHS has become such a bureaucratic organisation that all psychiatrists do all day is sit in meetings and fill out forms. So in fact...
Not just psychiatrists either.
You can get away without having a medical degree. And I think the fake doctor proves that point.
Well, it clearly does. But also, I've heard this from other friends of mine who are also doctors about the PLAB exam. You know, this is the exam that foreign graduates have to take. But it seems to me you do an MCQ and then you get pushed onto some assignments, but it's not very rigorous. And certainly when when you look at other countries, such as the USA, Australia and Canada, they actually have a much stronger sort of entrance test into their countries. We need to increase our testing, don't we?
Yeah, well, when I was at medical school, there were several exams every year you had to pass before you eventually qualified. And over here, these foreign graduates are turning up, and they only have to pass, it seems, 1 or 2 exams before we allow them to practice. I'm concerned about whether we're really able... I mean, I think, for example, if the General Medical Council was going to certify these people, there should be an inspection of these foreign medical schools to find out what's going on there.
They should. Let me just tell you a couple of examples. Sanjay Chatterjee from Larkfield was found guilty of professional misconduct for allegedly inserting a medical implement into someone's vagina without her consent when he was actually examining her for hemorrhoids.
Well, that's another very interesting issue about the fact they often have not been brought up in the culture of Britain. So the way doctors treat patients abroad is a bit different to the way we culturally, in terms of our respect for consent, for example, which is a massive thing.
But it's a fundamental keystone of
but not
practicing.
Abroad. Which is why you've got to be careful about.
What about this one? Zawi Mwimbi, trained in Zambia. He was sentenced to 12 months in prison for punching an elderly patient with dementia.
Yeah, so I think it is an interesting question as to what's going on with all these foreign medical graduates when we train a lot of doctors who end up leaving the NHS and not practicing medicine.
I'm just reading all of these. Shamaki Maximed, trained at the University of Southern Denmark before moving to the UK, struck off at the start of the year after being convicted of making indecent images of children possessing Class A drugs. Hassam Halim, who came from Egypt, was struck off after a series of allegations, including giving a patient 10 times the recommended dose of a mental health drug, conducting a rectal examination on a 17-year-old who couldn't give consent, sexually harassing a female Muslim colleague whom he told that women shouldn't work and that it was a sin to be gay. Unacceptable.
But these are all extreme examples that end up at the GMC. So how many other examples don't end up at the GMC? Because you've got to actually complain, by the way, before you can end up at the GMC. The GMC doesn't tend to go out doing surveillance of this sort of thing. So actually, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, I just want to finish this conversation by just quoting Carol Sikora, who is a friend of this programme, professor. He's a cancer specialist. He was founding dean of the University of Buckingham Medical School. He says 5 out of every 6 well-qualified school leavers are rejected by UK medical schools. 5 out of 6.
Well, that's another good point. A lot of people want to become doctors, are getting rejected, even though they are qualified, because of the competition. And yet we're allowing people to come over from abroad and practice medicine here when we have a lot of very well-intentioned, very driven, very motivated people who want to be doctors, who would be good doctors, but our system just isn't working in that respect.
It's shocking. It's utterly shocking. Thank you for the moment, Raj. Let me know your thoughts on all of that, please. We're asking about priorities this morning. This feeds very nicely into the question. Do you think Labour has its priorities right? It's meant to be spending priorities, but also looking at this, have we got our priorities right in this country? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. After the break, I want to talk about Valdo Calacane, the story that you will remember. Raj has written a very interesting article in one of the newspapers. We'll talk about that. We'll also go through all of this morning's front pages. That's all still to come. So much more here still to come. This is Weekend Breakfast.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Weekend Breakfast, 6:42, Saturday, February the 8th. I'm joined by Dr. Raj Persaud this morning. You can never see a psychiatrist, and then here you are. Lots of messages coming in. This is rather nice. Great show as usual, says AD. Love Raj's waistcoat. Where did he get it from?
Oh, this is Beretta. A Beretta waistcoat.
Is it?
Yes.
Is that good?
Because Beretta make guns. So, you know, guys.
Stop.
Guys think guns are cool.
Right.
So, but they make waistcoats as well.
Do they?
Yeah.
Country casual.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. This is my gamekeeper look.
Is it? Yes, I can see that. You're off to your estate later on today. David, this is John. Good morning to you, John. You would make a very good health secretary. Well, thank you very much. Some responsibility. Well, at least someone would be running the NHS who's actually worked in it. Oh, look, that would be novel, wouldn't it? Let's also just give you a couple more. This is Richie in mid-Sussex. David, I'm hoping Reform wins the next general election, and on day one they totally scrap net zero, scrap DEI, reinstate pensioners' winter fuel payments, scrap farmers' inheritance tax, and reinstate free speech into this country. One more, Mick in Wallington. Good morning, one of our regulars. Starmer should write a book. David, it should be called How to Destroy a Country in 6 Months. Keep all of those messages coming in. I want to talk now about Valdo Calacane. This happened earlier in the week, actually. We found out that Valdo Calacane, who was the triple killer, just shocking this, was not forced to take his antipsychotic medication, in part, and I don't understand this, because he didn't like needles. This is according to a major review of the NHS care. There was a catalogue of failings identified by an independent report. It says the system got it wrong, as we know. He went on to kill Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates in June of 2023. Now, maybe, Raj, you can help me to understand this. He was a paranoid schizophrenic. We know that. He also had no contact with mental health services or his GP for 9 months prior to the killing. The independent review showed that his risk wasn't fully understood. There were missed opportunities. The voice of Calacane's family, who repeatedly said he was a problem, wasn't considered. Other patients under the care of the same trust, some of which had been discharged, also had perpetrated acts of serious violence across 15 incidents between 2019 and 2023. And you have written a very interesting article in the Express.
Yes, I wrote an article in the Daily Express because this NHS review that has now taken quite a long time but come out and condemned all the failings. There were multiple failings where this man with paranoid schizophrenia, which many people suffer from and they're not dangerous, but in this particular case he was extremely dangerous. He was sectioned 4 times under the Mental Health Act in the past, and by the time you section someone under the Mental Health Act, because you can only really deprive them of their liberty if they're psychotic and unwell, if they're a danger. So by definition, on at least 4 occasions, they brought the law in because they thought he was so dangerous. And you'd have thought by the 2nd or 3rd occasion, you might be thinking, maybe there's something going wrong with the treatment plan here because it's just not working, right? But 4 times, and the very first time he got discharged...
Sorry, just to be clear, so he was sectioned, he was then put in an institution, he was then discharged.
Yes.
And then he came back in.
And each time it broke down, the care broke down. Now, one of the big scandals here is that he apparently was meant to have an injection, and in the injection, you only have to give it every 2 weeks. So you know the person's got medication on board for at least 2 weeks. Yeah. So it's much less likely they will break down, have a disorder, be unwell, be lost to follow-up, and be dangerous to the community. And he said he had a needle phobia. And the mental health team, for some strange reason, decided, well, that's okay then. We won't give you the injection, without thinking that may be just, for example, a way of avoiding treatment. And also, under the Mental Health Act, you are allowed to give people an injection, even if they have a needle phobia, because there's something much more serious going on, which is you could be dangerous to other people. You know, the contrast between the stress of overcoming a needle phobia and someone killing 3 people, which is what happened in this case, means the risk-benefit ratio is a bit obvious. So you should give the treatment.
Instead of giving the depot therapy, this injection, they decided that this paranoid schizophrenic would be okay to take oral medication. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, exactly. And when it was blindingly obvious, given he'd failed to take his medication over and over again, that was going to happen again. So this was a disaster waiting waiting to happen. And I believe that the report, although it was condemnatory of NHS care, actually missed some other failings, which is why I wrote my piece in the Express. For example, what you see all the time in the report is the care coordinator did this, his care coordinator did that.
And what is a care coordinator?
Exactly. I've worked in the NHS for several decades, and I still don't know what a care coordinator
what is it?
Well, it's someone who basically is not a doctor and is not a nurse. And this is a creeping tendency in the NHS to provide care by people who are not medically qualified or not nurses, for example. So a care coordinator is someone, in my experience, who has no qualifications, usually, that I would recognise, who's left in charge of seriously ill people out in the community. So that's one big point that the report missed. Another big point was, you could see in the report that the man, the paranoid schizophrenic, Valdo, was passed from one team to another. So you've got so many different teams in the NHS now that it's a system that's fragmented, and there's going to be a breakdown between the teams in terms of communication and handing patients over. It also allows one patient to be lost to a team, and then they can blame the other team to say you were meant to pick up his care. So there's a kind of blame thing that's going on in the NHS rather than actually looking after patients. When I first started in the NHS as a consultant psychiatrist, I would see a patient as an outpatient, and if they needed admitting, I would look after the same patient as an inpatient, and then continue to look after them when they got discharged. So there was a thing called continuity of care, and that's completely gone. You have different doctors looking after you if you're an inpatient to if you're an outpatient. So it's all these multiplicity of different teams means they've got to sit around in meetings all the time discussing
So
patients.
why have we got into that position? Because certainly when I was there, we had a single team that was responsible for the care of that patient, whether it was inpatient or outpatient. Where did it go wrong?
Well, it went wrong because doctors are expensive and the NHS is trying to find a cheap alternative. A large part of what the NHS has become is a system to avoid you seeing a doctor. One of the reasons people come and see me in private practice is that you can't get to see a psychiatrist in the NHS. And I see many people who are not wealthy. They just save up for months and months and months to come and see me because you can't actually see a doctor in mental health care in the NHS. So what's happened is you've got a whole army of staff who are not doctors, not nurses, who now work in the NHS to replace doctors and nurses. Where I work is Harley Street. If you walk up and down Harley Street, you don't see this army of staff that you've got in the NHS. For some strange reason, what you see is patients meet doctors, and that's just about it. It's a very simple system, and that's what patients want. They want to meet a doctor and have good care from that doctor.
And also, I suppose, the financial incentive is such that you want to keep your overheads as low as possible, so therefore you don't have legions of armies of clinical staff, which is what the NHS is extremely good at because it's not their money.
No, I agree. And that's why, going back to my famous pie argument from the last time we met, we should hand the health budget to each patient. They should have their own budget. They should be the state shouldn't provide health care. The state should pay for healthcare by giving each patient their own budget. They will now have power, the power of the consumer, to choose what care they want. But give the power and let the money go to the patient, I say.
Wow. Thank you, Raj. Also, I want to talk to you later on, if I can, about antidepressant drugs, because currently GPs prescribe antidepressant drugs. I would argue that many GPs maybe are not the right people to be doing that, but equally, if you say you have to see a psychiatrist, there aren't enough psychiatrists. We should talk about that as well.
Yeah, because Thomas Kingston died, and there was an inquest, and it was in the news last week. He was someone connected to the royal family, and he committed suicide after stopping his medication suddenly, and the coroner said these drugs are more dangerous than people realise, and yet the vast number of people are being prescribed antidepressants. By the way, something like 8 million people were prescribed antidepressants last year.
That's extraordinary.
But the vast majority of people who are prescribed antidepressants are prescribed by GPs, who, bless their cotton socks, know a lot more medicine than me, but they're not specialists in this area. So why are they doing all the prescribing and not specialists like psychiatrists?
Well, let's talk about that after this break. Still, so much more to come. I want to talk about farmers. The Country File star Adam Henson has warned Rachel Reeves that her budget is actually hurting British farmers. Also, I want to talk about this big story this morning. Hands off our ISAs. Rachel from Accounts not doing a very good job. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
So we need to get back to basics. When someone turns up here illegally, you've got to send them straight back, Mike. And if you find someone on the street, you've got to send them straight back. You've got to do that really, really quickly and not mess about. And we haven't. We've created this bureaucracy, this machinery, which enables lawyers to get migrants into a bureaucratic process, and delay for them is victory. The longer they can delay the case, the more likely it is that person's going to get to stay in the end, no matter what they've done.
Exactly right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk Weekend Breakfast. I'm joined by everyone's favourite psychiatrist. Everyone should have one. Dr Raj Prasad joins me this morning. Good morning again. Let's talk about Thomas Kingston. I talked about this before the break. The parents of Thomas Kingston, the husband of the Prince and Princess Michael of Kent's daughter, have warned about the side effects of antidepressants. As we know, he took his own life. He was married to Lady Gabriella Kingston, the King's second cousin. He died from a head injury in February last year at his parents' home in the Cotswold. A gun was found near his body. This is the crucial part. He had stopped taking his medication. He had been prescribed this by a GP at the Royal Mews surgery. This is a surgery for royal household staff in Buckingham Palace in the days leading up to his death, and his parents are calling for a change in how patients are prescribed SSRIs, a type of antidepressant.
So one of the mysteries here in this very, very tragic case, and the coroner commented on this, is on the day that the man died, right, and he shot himself with a shotgun, it looks like, head wound to the head, shotgun found nearby. The family were with him and said he was happy and he had not a care in the world.
So no suicidal ideation, nothing like that?
So this is the puzzle, and the coroner thinks that what happened was this was possibly a possible side effect of the antidepressant medication he'd been on, which he himself had stopped. So the coroner laid the blame at the...
Do we know when he stopped that medication, or the timeline of that?
But I think it was a few days before.
Right.
So what the coroner was saying is that maybe, and the family are calling for an idea that before you get prescribed an antidepressant, you've got to fill out a form now. This is their proposal that says that you've been warned about the side effects, you've been warned about the dangers of stopping it too suddenly. But my argument, and I wrote in the Daily Express a separate article about this, is that really what this is telling us is even if the GP surgery, which is treating the royal household, can't get a referral to an NHS psychiatrist, that is telling you how difficult it is to get these medications properly supervised.
So I've actually got the coroner's report here. So coroner says, during the course of the inquest, the evidence revealed matters giving rise to concern. In my opinion, there's a risk that future deaths will occur unless action is taken. So the matters of concern, whether there's adequate communications of the risk of suicide associated with these types of medication, these are SSRIs, whether the current guidance to persist with SSRI medication or switch to an alternative is appropriate when no benefit has been achieved, or especially when any adverse side effects are experienced. In my opinion, action should be taken to prevent future deaths, and I believe you have the power to take such action.
Well, this is in the news because this man, it's a tragic story, but this man is famous, he comes from a well-to-do family, he's successful, and yet mental health care was failing this family and this man in particular. So it's failing, if they're failing him, and he's being prescribed by the Royal Household General Practice, it's failing millions of people across the country. That's the point that I wanted to make. So we've seen two extremes. We've seen paranoid schizophrenia, that's being failed by the system, and at what many people would think is the milder end of the problem, and approaching 10 million people in this country are given antidepressants every year, so depression's a very common thing. This is at the milder end of the mental health thing.
And also, sorry, can I just ask you about that in terms of diagnostic pathway? You say it's very common and that we're giving lots of prescriptions. Are we over-medicalising this? this, because life is full of ups and downs, and guess what? You feel sad sometimes.
Well, there's a famous saying in psychiatry, which is whatever happened to unhappiness. There was a thing called unhappiness, which was an acceptance that basically life is stressful and you can become unhappy. But everyone's got depression now instead of just being unhappy. So depression being a diagnostic label. And we've seen a big shift in generations. We're going to sound like grumpy old men again.
We are grumpy old men.
Which is that 20 years ago, well, 30 years ago, people wanted to avoid having a diagnosis. Our generation weren't
and
keen.
Now they want one.
Yes, they want one. They're kind of like desperate for one. And one theory about why they want a diagnosis, younger people today, the diagnosis of ADHD, autism, etc., is maybe, and we are going to sound like grumpy old men, it's taking responsibility away from the fact you need to deal with life. You need to do something. Now you can blame your diagnosis as to why you're not getting out of bed in the morning and going to work. Wow. And we have got a big problem in terms of people not working.
Oh, 100%.
Taking long-term sick leave.
Yeah. I get loads of emails, actually, from people about that. Raj, thank you very much for the moment. Just lots of messages coming in. Pete says, why isn't Raj on some sort of government council? He talks so much sense and the sort of person we need. Peter, thank you very much.
I'm sure my wife would agree.
Good morning, says Ian in Somerset. Good morning, David and Raj. I love the show. Just thinking that all these people and young adults signed off with depression and anxiety would probably be ready for work if it wasn't for the GP's generosity. We can talk more about that if you like later on. So much more still to come. After the break, I'm going to take you through this morning's front pages. I want to also talk about Rachel Reeves yet again and her budget and what she is doing to the state of the British economy. And of course, we're going to talk about interest rates as well. We're going to be talking about what it means for you. This is Weekend Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
good morning to you just after 7 o'clock on Saturday, February the 8th. I'm David Bull. This is Weekend Breakfast. Hope you're very well, wherever you are across this great nation and indeed around the world. Just see Margaret's in Tunisia. Keep all your messages coming in. Great news for you this morning. Of course, it's Global Movie Day today. That's right, it's celebrated every year on the second Saturday of February during Oscar season. The idea behind it is it encourages you to watch a movie, or as I like to say, a film, because I'm British, and also to enjoy a good old-fashioned celluloid story. Movie Day.
And action.
Very good. And action also today, International Scotch Day. Yummy. A day celebrating Scotland's finest export. And did you know this? The origins of Scotch whisky date back to the 15th century. Well, it's now 7 o'clock. Time for a tipple, I think. Also, a Laugh and Get Rich Day, a day where you can have a giggle, enjoy the many benefits that a good laugh can have on your health. It makes you happier, it lowers your stress level, and strengthens your immune system. So, time to laugh.
I know I am, I'm sure I am. He's H-A-P-P.
Why? Let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So I have some new ones for you this hour. On this day in 1587, after 19 years of imprisonment, Mary Queen of Scots was beheaded for treason at Fotheringay Castle in Northamptonshire. She had been implicated in the Babington plot to murder her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I. On this day in 1855, and this is intriguing, the Devil's Footprints mysteriously appeared in southern Devon. Trails of hoof-like marks appeared overnight in the snow. Estimates of the total distance covered by the prints ranged from 40 to 100 miles. Houses, rivers, haystacks, other obstacles were allegedly travelled straight over, and the footprints also appeared on the tops of snow-covered roofs and high walls, as well as leading up to and exiting various drain pipes with a diameter as small as 4 inches. And on this day in 1965, Health Minister Kenneth Robinson announced cigarette advertisements were to be banned from British television on this very day in 1965. And those are this hour's fascinating facts.
Weekend breakfast, yeah, it's all about the fun. With David and Raj, it takes us me kind. The Weekend breakfast team, we found our home.
Well, a very good morning to you. 5 minutes past 7, Saturday, February the 8th. As you heard there, he got his own name check, Dr. Raj Prasad.
Yes.
Stop grimacing at me.
Sorry.
Oh, is that your resting?
I'm very worried about you.
No, it's your I bet you are.
I keep looking for my prescription pad.
Oh, God, there'll be a huge tome, won't it? You'll be running out of ink. How are you?
Fine, thank you very much.
Good.
Yeah. So it was a punk single there with our names in it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, Dave does it.
But punk was our era, right? Well, mine anyway.
It was your era. I'm much younger.
Before your time.
Way before my time. No, I'm sort of an 80s kid, really.
Okay,
yeah,
right.
83 to 92 was kind of like the peachy moment.
Yeah. The 1980s is the best decade for music.
Much
scientifically
better.
Proven. Yeah, when I say that, people believe me.
Scientifically proven by us.
Yeah, that's right.
By basically going, yes, it was the best decade. Well, I would agree with that. Good morning, everyone. Let me just show you the headlines this morning. Honestly, I would go back to bed if I were you this morning. This is the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Labour now, by the way, so 20 billion hole. Then, of course, we had the budget from Rachel Reeves, another 20 billion. Now they're talking about giving money to the Chagos Islands, and now they are open to talks on slavery payouts. Yes, that's right. You heard this right. The Foreign Office is going to open talks on slavery reparations with Caribbean officials who are demanding trillions of pounds. It's not a tiny amount either, by the way. Barbados alone wants 3.9 trillion. And the Caribbean colonies overall, or former Caribbean colonies, want, wait for this, 18 trillion pounds. The former Conservative government said, no, we're not talking about reparations, and now Labour keen to do that. By the way, David Lammy, if you remember, says he is Caribbean and not British. That stalwart of British politics. Also, this morning, the front page of The Times, alarm over diversity push. This is the way that universities get funding. So essentially, they have fees from the students, but there is also an academic grant top-up that comes from government. It was based on some simple metrics. This was research impact, research output, and the environment that supports research. Now they're deciding they're going to change that to encompass more DEI. Make of that what you will. That flies in the face of what we're seeing here in the FT this morning, because Accenture joins the rush to ditch diversity targets. President Trump has gone in and said DEI, diversity, equality and inclusion, is a load of nonsense. You need to get rid of it. Loads of companies are re-looking at what they're doing. Meta, McDonald's, Target have all ditched diversity and inclusion goals. We've got Julie Sweet here from Accenture. She says, I am sunsetting our diversity goals. Do you think that's a good thing? Let me know your thoughts on that as well. Also this morning, and we haven't talked about this yet, Rachel Reeves. This is really interesting, actually. Country File host Adam Henson has said to Rachel Reeves, your tax rate is hurting farming. He is a tenant farmer. His family have been tenant farmers for some time. He says, you have got this wrong, which is fascinating, actually. And now Rachel Reeves is looking at grabbing your ISA. Hands off our ISAs. These are the stories in the Daily Mail, front page of the Daily Mail this morning. Loads of messages coming in. Good morning, David. This is Michelle from Altrincham. I love your show every weekend. That's very kind. Thank you very much. I wonder what happened at the emergency meeting that the Cabinet had yesterday. They seem to be saying on X there could be a sacking on the cards. Well, they need to sack a lot of them, don't they, Raj?
Yeah. Well, going back to your point about diversity and inclusion,
yes,
and the fact that companies are now rethinking it. Whatever we may think about Trump, the fact that Trump has said that he's going to sack all those people involved in that, and he did make a slightly crazy claim about the helicopter crash in the aeroplane, that it was all about diversity in air traffic control. But one thing I would say is he's put it on the agenda, and the fact he's made these statements means that people can begin to think about, actually, are we going down the wrong route? So he does do some interesting things in terms of helping people think differently.
100%. But, you know, they say when America sneezes, we catch a cold, and it's absolutely right. Trump, I mean, whether you like him or loathe him, at least I know the direction of travel with Trump.
But also, he says things that are outrageous, but he says things that maybe give us permission to have a conversation.
What, like he's going to take Canada and Greenland? They were pretty outrageous.
Yeah, but also apparently on the TikTok memes about the idea that he made it the United Kingdom, because he spotted the fact United is in both names, you see, United States, United Kingdom. Yeah. And he says...
hey, look, it's United.
That's right.
Yeah.
He said in the comedy skit, the only problem is, he said, they do talk funny over there.
Yeah, they do. We spell correctly. Lots of other messages coming in as well. Good morning, David says, Tracy, I love it when Raj is on. He makes me laugh throughout the show. You can have him. I work in the NHS and have to suffer equality and diversity talks, such as how to pronounce names correctly because it offends. What a load of nonsense. Also, it is not seen as very compassionate to say back in the day, over 20 years ago, the way we did things then. Ha ha, you and Dr. Raj broke the NHS golden rule, apparently, saying what it was like for you years ago. Why? Why? It was like that.
Also, more recently, when I was moving jobs, I did this incredible thing where you have a 3-day induction now in the NHS to learn all these different things about how to pronounce words and how to pick stuff up. There was an hour-long course.
What do you mean to pick stuff up?
Like patients, if they've fallen over, how to pick them up. Anyway, so it was 3 days of this, right? And I lost the will to live. So I came up with a plan with my secretary. I said, page me in the late afternoon of day one, and I'll get up and say, I'm really sorry, medical emergency, got to go. Okay, so she paged me. I stood up and said, terribly sorry, got to go. And as I walked out, the guy who was running the course about how to pick stuff up, he followed me into the corridor. He goes, where are you going? I said, I've got to go. He said, look, I know you can't stay for the rest of the afternoon. There's a whole afternoon on how to pick stuff up.
Yes, of course.
He said, so what I'll do is I'll boil it down for you and just show you in the next minute or so how to do it. So he showed me how to pick stuff up in about 30 seconds and then let me go. And I thought, well, if you can do it in 30 seconds, why you spend... Well, I know why he's got a whole afternoon and how to pick stuff up. There was a whole afternoon on how to pick stuff up.
Bend your knees, keep your back straight.
Yes, yeah, that was it.
I can tell you that, yeah.
We should run a course together. We could make a lot of money.
And just stretch it out for days on end, yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
About pronouns. We can do pronouns and how to talk to everyone nicely.
3 days. 3 days of induction.
I mean, you've got me thinking now. You know, back in the day, I had surgeons. If you didn't know what this thing was here in the operating theatre, they threw scalpels at you. That kind of behaviour is not acceptable. But equally, I learned very quickly what that was.
But there's also no induction. You just landed, you know, straight away.
See one, do one, teach one.
You turned up and they told you what to do. There was no induction.
You're doing the appendix operation.
Yes.
Am I?
You look like me.
Me? I've never seen one. But the thing is, it's actually true. Don't worry at all. Don't panic. Lots of stories I want to be talking about, as well as what's on in the paper. This is fascinating, actually. This is about the economy. I watched Andrew... Did you see Andrew Bailey giving the statement after the MPC meeting? He said, and I thought this was fascinating, of course, if you don't know who he is, he's the governor of the Bank of England. He said Britain's bloated public sector is dragging down the economy. Of course, we know the Bank of England. And this is another nasty blow for Rachel Reeves. They slashed our growth forecasts in half. He said another 500,000 workers in the... 500,000 workers in the public sector have been added since lockdown. And guess what? That has not been matched by a rise in productivity. Of course, civil servants last week also threw their toys out of the pram when they were told they had to come back into the office for 2 days a week. He is actually blaming the public sector, the predominant employer in the public sector, basically for holding back growth in this country. He also then waded into another massive issue, saying we've had record net migration. It means overall productivity growth is weaker than previously thought. We have more labour force, he said. We've got the same output. Therefore, you conclude we have lower productivity. He's not normally someone I admire, but well done him.
Well, the Bank of England is independent.
Allegedly.
So he's, in a way, he's allowed to say these things. So it's a good thing we have an independent Bank of England, and he can say some things that are very uncomfortable for the government. But again, 3-day induction courses, diversity, inclusion. I don't think the South Koreans or the Taiwanese or the Vietnamese, who we're competing with in a globalised economy, have got 3-day induction courses or are bothered about diversity and inclusion. And that one of the reasons why our productivity is being sapped is because attention is being diverted away from the basic point of what a company or the NHS should be doing. We get diverted into this other stuff, and no wonder productivity is going down, because we're not actually focusing on the goal, which is to produce something.
But also, we talked about this earlier with healthcare, that when you compare the private sector with the NHS sector, it is bloated, there's too much bureaucracy, there are lots of people counting paper clips and not actually doing anything. But again here, tell me, how have we managed for a public sector to go from 5.8 million people in the public sector up to 6.3, which is what they think will be at the end of the decade? When you look, and I wrote these figures down last night, 43 million people of working age. If that is the case and you have 6.3 working in the public sector paid for by us, 15% of all working adults will work for the state. What is this, China?
Well, yeah, the state is growing and growing, and what we really need is a growing private sector, because that's the engine of the economy. The public sector absorbs money, but it's not clear to what extent they contribute. So the private sector is very important, and also an entrepreneurial spirit. That's one of the reasons why the US economy is the greatest economy on the planet, because they encourage an entrepreneurial spirit. It's no accident they've got Google, they've got Microsoft, they've got Nvidia, they've got Facebook. How come all these top 5 tech companies are based there, and we're not really producing the same kind of innovation? Whereas back in the day, 100 years ago, all the top car companies back in the day were British, for example. That was the cutting-edge technology 100 years ago, and we were world leaders then.
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned... I will do this story because you mentioned cars there. The owner of Vauxhall has told staff it's going to close its van making factory in Luton in April. This is Stellantis. They've been making vehicles there since 1905. They're moving the electric van production to its other UK plant in Ellesmere Port in Cheshire. It just reminds me, here we go, chasing net zero, another thing that no one actually voted for. And of course, the real tragedy here is that they are going to make people redundant. It is another blow to Rachel Reeves. And when you downgrade our forecasts, as they have done, from 1.5% to 0.75%, then of course it means the economy is struggling. So we've seen an interest rate cut to 4.5%. They are now saying, because the economy is so weak, we're going to see more interest rate cuts coming down the line. Well, I'm pleased with that, if that is the case.
Well, if a van manufacturing plant closes, that obviously is terrible. But the key question is, what plant is opening instead? What are we going to be doing instead of making vans? Where are the technologies of the future that we are going to lead the world in?
Well, and of course, current rules state that EVs must make up 22% of a manufacturer's car sales this year and 10% of van sales. What happens if people don't want one?
Well, that's the wrong thing. That's a top-down approach, which, of course, Labour is famous for, which is impose an idea. Why not make the product so attractive
that people want it?
That people want it.
Yeah.
That's a much better way of doing it.
Let's just talk about this now, shall we? About the farmers, which is in one of the papers this morning, which I just thought was very interesting. When you've got Adam Henson, who's the Country File presenter, I've lost it now, but he is the Country File presenter. He's come out and said, here we are. That Rachel Reeves' budget is hurting British farmers. This is Countryfile host Adam Henson. He says that her tax rate hurts farming. Turn to page 4. It's actually pretty eviscerating. He says this is not political. That's the point that he's trying to make. He says that actually Rachel Reeves needs to rethink this. The changes in APR, the agricultural property relief, business property relief, will hurt farming. It wasn't delivered in the right way. And as we know, tomorrow there is going to be a massive protest in London where farmers are coming with their tractors to say you are not listening.
Well, I think that a lot of people in government don't realise, because they're not really connected with the countryside, how important farming is. It's important for many, many reasons beyond just the fact that it's an industry in itself. So one thing is, obviously, we had this thing called World War II, where this country was blockaded, and therefore the ability to produce enough food to feed the population became extremely important. Yeah. And ever since then, there's a legacy idea that actually don't abandon the ability to be self-sufficient in food production on an island. So I think that's an important idea we seem to have forgotten. But another really important idea is farmers don't just grow stuff, they look after the countryside.
That's right.
Geographically speaking, it's the largest industry in Britain. And if you don't have farming, who's going to look after the countryside? That bit, because our countryside's a very important part of our national identity.
Of course it is.
And that bit is being neglected in people's treating the farmers so badly.
But also, you see, there's no joined-up thinking here, because if you truly want to get to net zero, then surely you don't want to be importing all your food, so therefore it stands to reason you have to grow it in this country.
Local production.
Local production, as you said, grow for Britain, or, you know, dig for Britain. 30% of farms made a loss in 2023 and 24. Downing Street doesn't seem to realise this. 25% made profits under 25,000. And the dichotomy here is that Downing Street says it's only going to affect 550 farms. The NFU, the National Farmers Union, says that's way out. It's 70,000 farms. So who's right?
Well, also, when you've got a tradition that goes back thousands and thousands of years, and then you can one set of politicians come along and destroy it in a instantly, the skills that have taken thousands of years in families that have been passed on get destroyed. When you lose it, you can't get it back. When you lose a generation of people who could farm and you've lost them, it's difficult to restart the thing. So be very careful when something is precious and has lasted thousands of years about monkeying around with it.
Yeah, absolutely right.
But that's about tradition, tradition being an important thing.
But it's also, the fact is, you have a party which is totally unrepresentative of the countryside. I don't think any of them have been to the countryside. And certainly when you look at DEFRA, they don't have people who seem to know what they're doing. And you're seeing real people venting their spleen, and you will see that on Monday in London.
Well, the right to protest is very important. But one of the questions is, from an economic standpoint, do they understand the value of farming beyond the basic economics in terms of the long-term safety of this country and also the long-term guardianship of the countryside?
Just talking about net zero, which we have, Ed Miliband was strangely absent when they were talking about the expansion of Heathrow. Now, he has dropped his opposition to building a third runway at Heathrow. He is the Energy Security and Net Zero Secretary. He threatened to resign, if you recall, over the expansion of the airport. This was in 2009. He voted against expansion in 2018. Now he says he's on board. It's part of collective responsibility. He's been stood on, hasn't he?
Yeah, but I also think this third runway, there was a thing called this fast rail network to the north, which has
I remember it. Yes.
Decades and decades have gone by without it actually being built. So we may be talking about a third runway. Our ability to actually build one,
is it?
No, I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, but again, it's one of those things. By talking about it, it makes the government look like they're doing something about the economy, and it's really worrying that they are very interested in appearing to do something about the economy as opposed to actually doing something about the economy.
Well, Rachel Reeves now says the economy will always trump net zero. Well, hang on a minute, Rachel. Which is it? Because one minute you're telling us it's net zero, then it's the economy. Is this because she knows she's in deep trouble?
Maybe, I think so, because what we're seeing is a lack of ideas from them in terms of what they're going to do. We're not seeing any innovative plans other than a third runway, which we know will never get built.
Which we've talked about forever. It's interesting, actually, just in terms of politics, I just want to mention this as well. Kemi Badenoch has said the Conservatives would bar low-paid or jobless migrants from getting indefinite leave to remain. This is her first ever policy. It's like the Ladybird book of My First Policy, isn't it? Immigrants would only be allowed to apply for ILR after 10 years, which is double the current requirement. They would be barred from applying if they used benefits or access social housing in that period. Anyone who arrives illegally, even if you're granted asylum, would be barred from applying for ILR. You can stay as a refugee, and then you could be returned home if the conditions which caused them to flee was resolved. So we have a whole policy.
Yeah, but isn't it a bit worrying? I mean, obviously you've been a bit hard on Labour, much to my surprise.
I'm being a bit hard on the Conservatives.
Yeah, but I mean, why is it taking her so long to come up with any policies?
Very
and
good
why
point.
is this the most exciting policy she can come up with? Really? Okay, maybe. I don't know.
But surely, and I want to talk about this, the latest polls, and I will show you those polls after this break, but essentially, I think both parties are deeply worried about the ascendancy of reform.
Yeah, OK, but there's a slight vested interest.
Well, there is a slight vested interest. But, Raj, I will show you the polls in a minute.
All right,
I'll show you. All right.
So you're not delusional?
I'm not. I need depot therapy as we speak. Lots of messages coming in. We'll talk about those polls, actually, and I'll show you a map as well of the United Kingdom and voting intention.
But I'm a big fan of new parties, because I think new parties bring new talent to politics.
Great. I'll get you a rosette.
OK, thanks.
Good morning, David. Great show as always. Sean in Warwickshire, good morning to you. It did make me laugh out loud when Dr. Raj mentioned TILE. That's the manual handling training. We did it in the ambulance service and in primary care. I've done it so many times, but it's so important. I wish I had a pager. Hi, David. Great show. Sue from Essex, sunny Essex. Good morning, Sue. I love it when Dr. Raj is on. At least you're the only one.
Raj, is that my mum again?
Yes, your mum. At the end of the next 4 years, I'm going to need his expertise to repair my mental health. I think everyone needs your help to repair their mental health. Loads of you getting in touch this morning. I'm asking, has Labour got its spending priorities right? Let me know your thoughts, please. On that, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. Still, so much more to come after the break. I'm going to show you those polls. I'm going to show you a map of the United Kingdom as well in terms of, why are you looking at me like, in terms of voting intention, and also, have you got Zoom fatigue? I tell you what, I've got fatigue of him. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
she is proposing a number of things. One, if you're jobless, you're low paid, you've been claiming benefits, then no, you can't settle indefinitely in the UK, and therefore you wouldn't be allowed to then claim citizenship. She's also saying if you've entered the country legally, you're only allowed to apply for indefinite leave to remain once you've been in the country for 10 years, not the current 5 years, and after that you have to wait another 5 years before you are allowed to attempt to apply for citizenship. I mean, I think most people would just be stunned to learn that you can be here for just 5 years.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk Weekend Breakfast. I'm joined by Dr. Raj Persaud this morning. Always handy to have a consultant psychiatrist on call. Many of you getting in touch. Good morning, Nicola in London. Good morning to you. Hi, David. Great show as always. Thank you very much. I love Raj. Everyone loves you. Oh, you may wish to warn your audience.
Don't get jealous.
That I've just received my Thames Water payment plan for 2025. My monthly charge has gone up by 62.5%. Crikey. How many times inflation is that? Daylight robbery. Colin Doughty, if the government wants to build these solar farms, they already have plenty of land that's being unused, military bases and so on. There's a bigger reason for them to want farmers' land, and it's not for solar farms. Watch this space. Good morning, David, says Maggie in London. I'm fed up with Labour freely giving money away when our own are suffering. We need our own Dodge. This is the Department of Government Efficiency under Elon Musk in the United States. David, great show. Good morning, Andy. Thank you. If David Lammy is Caribbean, should he really be looking after the foreign interests of the United Kingdom when he doesn't seem to like the United Kingdom? I just don't think he should be a minister. You should only be able to get to the top level of government if you are British through and through. Keep all of those messages coming in. I'm asking, has Labour got its spending priorities right? Yet more devastating detail from Rachel Reeves. Of course, we were talking about this morning, front page of the Daily Telegraph. Labour to open talks on slavery payouts. Yes, the Caribbean islands want £18 trillion at a time when we are really stretched. I want to show you these polls now, the latest political polls, and these are pretty gobsmacking. Let's start with Find Out Now. So this is the latest Westminster voting intention, which I want to bring you now. It's pretty stunning. For the very first time, we now have Reform UK in the lead at 29%, Labour at 25%, Conservatives at 18%, Lib Dems at 13%, and Greens at 10%. That means Reform has gone up 2 points. Labour, weirdly, has gone up 2 points. Conservatives down 3 points. This is after Kemi Badenoch's speech, I think, as well. Then, well, if you think that's a one-off, let's look at another poll. This is YouGov now, which is another poll that has been carried out. If we've got the YouGov one, let me show you. Reform, once again, in the lead at 25. Labour at 24. Conservatives at 21, Lib Dems 14, Green at 9, SNP at 3. So 2 polls there. And I want to also now show you a map of the UK in terms of Westminster voting intention, and there you can see a sea of turquoise across England, particularly across England, actually. Raj, something is going on.
Very interesting, isn't it? Because we've had two-party politics for many, many decades, if not 100 years at least. And now new parties are coming in. I think it's a good thing that they're new parties without wanting to take sides with any particular new party, because it draws people into politics who normally would be very alienated from it. But I think those polls are most worrying for the Conservatives, because they got this new leader, Kemi, and I think that parties have to have a good instinct about what the electorate wants. I think the Conservatives had an instinct for what Conservatives, i.e. activist members of the party, wanted, but I don't think think they chose necessarily well in terms of thinking, have we chosen a leader that the electorate wants? That's the key point. So I think the Conservatives would be most worried about those polls.
So I think what's interesting about that is that my friends in the Conservative Party almost have a divine...
You have friends?
I do have friends, and that's why they're in the Conservative Party. But they've almost got this delusion, actually, this ideological belief that they have a divine right to rule, and that's very dangerous.
Absolutely, I think. And also, new parties bring new ideas and new ways of doing things, and we have to think about the fact that the old ways of doing things just hasn't been working.
People are sick and tired. You vote for one lot, they then renege on their electoral promises. You vote for another lot, they renege on their electoral promises. And I think people are saying, I mean, fear has been used a great deal when it comes to general elections. Don't vote for this lot because you don't know they're untried and untested. Now people, I think, are saying, well, we tried you, both of you were hopeless, and now we're trying something else.
The fear thing's really interesting because psychologically we know that negative emotions are more powerful than positive emotions. So it's called the power of the bad or the power of the negative. And a lot of politicians are very astute in terms of manipulation, focus on making us frightened of new things to try and keep us doing the old thing. But the old thing hasn't been working, so people may be getting more and more interested in trying something new.
Fascinating.
They may be getting more brave and more courageous, I think.
They may well be.
Taking risks.
Should we just talk about this? This is the front page of the Mirror this morning. I have no anger. He did what he had to do. This is a really interesting story. This is about the ex-crook shot by Tony Martin. Do you remember the farmer? Says he bears no malice towards the farmer who left him injured for life. Brendan Fearon said he was sad to hear the 80-year-old died this week, 26 years old. 26 years later, crikey, after he killed fellow burglar Fred Barras, 16, in the Norfolk raid. I have no anger. He did what he had to do to protect himself and his home.
So, Brett, I'm interested in the story because the poor man, Tony Martin, who's died, served 3 years for shooting people who were burglaring him. And the poor man had been burgled like 10 times. So he was fed up, and the police just weren't showing up. So the police have to think about the fact that if you don't show up, these terrible tragedies are more likely to occur. But what I'm interested in, and the guy Brendan has been talking to the press, I think that, I've got to be careful what I say here, but the fact he was shot, in a way, seems to have been one of the reasons why he's turned away from crime. So one of the questions, you know, many years later, because we know recidivism rates are very, very high, is does the criminal justice system stop people from committing crime, and does it train them to commit more crime? And obviously this was a terrible tragedy and no one should shoot anyone, but I think actually what this guy is saying, it wasn't the criminal justice system that made him, you know, turn away. It was actually this terrible thing that happened, actually. Wow. Interesting.
That's extraordinary. Let's talk about something else. This is a great story in the Times. Are you suffering from Zoom fatigue with endless video calls? Of course, post-COVID, everyone's been on a Zoom, sitting there in your pants. It may be because you dislike your own face and are tired of it staring back at you from the corner of the screen. I've never heard of this. Apparently there is a common phenomenon known as facial appearance dissatisfaction, growing weariness suffered by those who have to do a large number of calls.
And ever since COVID and the fact that Zoom took off and people had to sit around from working from home and staring at themselves on a computer screen, the need or the desire or people applying for cosmetic surgery has gone up dramatically. In fact, the number one reason why people apply for personal loans now in the UK is for a cosmetic surgical procedure of some kind.
Is that right?
So people are looking at themselves and getting more upset with the way they look and choosing cosmetic surgery as a result. So that's a very interesting effect.
Isn't it?
Well, that's good for you to go for cosmetic procedures because of staring at yourself at Zoom, because you become more aware.
But hang on a minute, aren't you seeing a mirror image of yourself when you use Zoom? So therefore you're not actually seeing a real, true identity of your face.
But we know from this relatively rare disorder, body dysmorphic disorder, where people become preoccupied with something wrong with their nose. Michael Jackson famously probably had this. And what happens if people get preoccupied for psychological reasons, there's something wrong with their nose, and there's nothing physically wrong with your nose, is you go and have a procedure. But because it was a psychological problem, you don't think the procedure's done anything, so you have another one, and another one, and another one. By the 10th procedure on your nose, it may have started off looking okay. By the 10th procedure, it won't look okay. It will look a bit weird. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But one of the theories about how that sort of cascade occurs is just staring at yourself. If you stare at your nose, don't go and do this. If you stare at your nose in a mirror for a long time, it will begin naturally to look a bit odd. So that I really look odd.
Oh, you do look odd.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that Zoom may be doing.
Well, and also I think as you grow older, of course, your nose and your ears continue continue to grow. So,
speak for yourself.
Well, I can tell you. I can tell you, particularly my ears. They're like radar dishes now. Thank you, Raj, for the moment. Good morning, David. This is Jennifer. Hi, Raj. I always sit and watch you every morning. That's very kind. Looking at those polls.
That's weird because I'm not on every morning.
No, or me. We need to talk.
I'd like to look at myself every morning.
We need to talk, Jennifer.
Find out. Yeah, we've been pirated. We're being broadcast somewhere in the world.
We are. I've lost you now. I always sit and watch you every morning. Look at those polls, those political polls. What comes straight to mind? Who the hell is still voting Labour? I can't understand why people would still vote for the idiot in number 10. He's anti-Britain. That's all he comes across as when I hear what he and his cronies have to say. I'm really enjoying
the polls are
show.
Surprisingly high for Labour, though, don't you think?
I do. I mean, but there again, I have other friends, and yes, I have other friends who support Labour, and they are determined for this to work because they've waited so long. I mean, it's derangement.
Yeah.
It's derangement syndrome because they know it's not going very well, but they keep on telling me it's going really well because they want to reinforce the fact that it is going well, which it isn't.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with derangement syndrome, but I would say that maybe one of the reasons why their polls are standing up, despite how terrible it's been going, is because people have waited so long for them to come in, they're willing to maybe give them a longer period of time to prove themselves, maybe.
No, they're determined to prove themselves right. That's what that is about, definitely. We have to take a break. After the break, I promise we'll get to the front pages. We've only been on air an hour and 38 minutes. Haven't quite managed it yet. We'll get to the front pages. Good morning, this is Weekend Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
7:40 on Saturday, February the 8th. I'm David Bull. Front pages now this morning. This is front page of the Daily Telegraph this morning. It will make your jaw drop open. That's right. Labour is going to open talks on slavery payouts because there's a 20 billion black hole. And then, of course, they've raised another 20 billion. They want another 15 billion to pay the Chagos Islands. And on top of that, they want to find trillions of pounds for slavery reparations as well. Also, front page of the Telegraph this morning. Front page of the Telegraph, streeting the NHS is too keen to hire migrants. It's an important story. Homegrown medics who have passed their exams in this country are being denied jobs because the NHS is obsessed with getting people from abroad. There's another really odd story as well in the Telegraph this morning. Ed Miliband is set to announce billions in subsidies for wood-burning power plants to prevent Britain losing a critical source of energy. What? So this is mad Ed and his net zero zealotry. He's now burning wood, but at the same time, also, they're going to stop people like me having a log fire.
OK, so before we leap to any conclusions here, David,
yes,
I mean, it's fair. I mean, obviously the plan is that we'll round up the elderly, they'll go and warm their hands.
I wonder what you're going to say.
They're going to go and warm their hands
right, yeah.
at the wood-burning stove.
right.
At the wood-burning plant.
Yeah, because they can't afford their heating.
Exactly,
yes.
exactly. Oh, it's a new cutting-edge technology, obviously, wood-burning. We're going to lead the world in wood-burning.
Here's some logs. Let's set fire to them. Right, front page of the Times this morning, alarm over diversity push. Universities that fail to champion diversity face cuts to their research budgets under a funding plan that critics warn will put ideological conformity above academic excellence. They used to measure it essentially according to input, output and also the environment created at the university. They're changing all of that to make sure that the universities push to DEI, but they need to read the room. Front page.
So our universities are going to go the way of our car industry.
That is correct.
The way that's going.
And they're going completely in the opposite direction to the rest of the world. And this feeds nicely into the FT this morning. Accenture joins the rush to ditch diversity targets. The US executive orders take toll. This is Julie Sweet. She is the chief exec of Accenture. They are scrapping diversity and inclusion goals. They are, what does she say, sunsetting their diversity goals. They're following on from people like McDonald's and Target and Meta in ditching DEI. Is this the beginning of the end of that? And how about employing the best and the brightest instead? This is the front page of The Guardian this morning. Trump's aid cuts could be a big mistake, according to David Lammy. Donald Trump's plans to make dramatic cuts to the United States international aid budget could be a big strategic mistake that allows China to step in and further its global influence. David Lammy has cautioned that Britain's own experience of merging the Department for International Development into the Foreign Office, which was announced by Boris Johnson in 2020, was a serious blow to Britain's soft power. The Daily Express, we talked about this earlier on. This is Rachel Reeves. Reeves' tax raid hurts British farms. Adam Henson, who is a host of Country File, has come out saying this budget is actually hurting farmers. Tomorrow, by the way, there is a big protest plan where farmers are coming to London to show their displeasure and disquiet over Rachel Reeves' introduction of all of these taxes on farms. And there is enormous disparity between how many farms are going to be affected according to the government as opposed to the numbers affected according to the NFU. Only one of them can be right. The Daily Mail, the Chancellor's after your cash, hands off our cash ISAs. Rachel Reeves was warned last night, axing tax-free saving pots could crash the markets. So apparently she's been lobbied by city bosses in recent weeks. Essentially, there is 300 billion quid sitting in cash ISAs. She wants to get her paws on it, and that would build growth in this country. But at the same time, huge alarm bells about what that would do in terms of raising interest rates in the country. We're going to talk about that later on. I'm going to be joined by Justin Urquhart-Stewart at 9:05 this morning to talk about the interest rates, what we think is going to happen, the state of the British economy. Also, Sally Mitchell will be joining me, who is a mortgage advisor at the Mortgage Mum. Loads of you coming off fixed-rate mortgages. What do you do given the current situation? But this headline this morning, Daily Mail, hands off our cash ISAs. The weekend this morning, UK tax cuts for Musk, Zuckerberg and Bezos. So as we know, Donald Trump levying tariffs on lots of countries, as we know. The UK has been spared this so far, but the price might be to lower UK taxes on tech giants, including X, Amazon and Facebook, plus relaxed regulation. That would be the price of escaping trade tariffs. Tech firms want an exemption from the UK digital services tax, which raises about £1 billion a year. Reeves is going to hold talks on with the tech giants in the US. We talked about this as well, the front page of the Daily Mirror this morning. I have no anger. He did what he had to do. This is the ex-crook shot by Tony Martin. Insists he bears no malice towards the farmer who left him injured for life. The Sun front page. Vile, rude and abusive, but ITV covered up for Gino. We're going to talk more about that story as well at 9:20 with Steve Denyer in our entertainment feature. And the Daily Star, I do love the Daily Star this morning. Very important advice. It's time to get the big coat out, Raj. You can get your big furry coat out. It's going to plunge to -7 degrees this weekend, according to the Daily Star. We're going to have these Arctic temperatures of -7, and their big headline on page 5. Have you seen my thermals, Doreen?
Well, as you know, when I appeared on your show as a Russian oligarch,
you did.
There was a big furry hat thing. They didn't mention that.
No.
You know.
Have you got it ready?
Well, I believe that when I wear something, next week everyone will be wearing it.
Everyone.
Yeah, I'm always at the cutting edge.
You are. I'm going to get my furry hat out in the break. After the break, let's get all the latest sport. Joining us this morning will be Will Hobbs, who's a talkSPORT reporter. That's all still to come. Good morning.
The other day, an activity session being run by the Royal Museums in Greenwich. They're running drag aerobic sessions for children of all ages, and having looked at the advertising material, it looks like softcore pornography. Another example, King's College London, meant to be one of the best educational institutes of the country, has just appointed a quote-unquote asexual activist as a research fellow.
Great.
Whatever the hell that means.
I mean, why are they bothering?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, this is Talk 7:50 on Saturday, February the 8th. Right, time for something different. Will Hobbs joins us this morning, talkSPORT reporter. Of course, Dr. Raj still here, clinic open. Good morning, Will.
Good morning.
How are you?
Well, I'm a bit terrified of this clinic. I don't know what to expect.
You really are in the middle of a doctor's clinic.
I don't know what signals are being picked up.
He's looking at you.
Yeah. Is this a TV programme or an outpatient department?
Or both.
Or both. Well, quite. Well, you can get some advice later on. Where should we start? FA Cup.
Let's start the FA Cup. Let's start last night. So the fourth round we're in now. Manchester United squeaked through under very controversial circumstances. They were training 1-0 to Leicester, who are managed by a former Manchester United legend, Ruud van Nistelrooy, who really needed a win.
Okay.
And they were playing very well, Leicester, 1-0 up. And then Manchester United brought on a player called Garnacho, who's been struggling a bit, but he injected some energy. And it was 1-1 in the 93rd minute. Manchester United had a free kick. And Harry Maguire, who used to play for Leicester, headed it in. Man United go through. Turns out he was miles offside. But there's no VAR until the next round of the FA Cup, so it wasn't spotted, and the linesman just had a nightmare.
How do you not spot miles offside?
Well, that's the thing. So I guess one of the theories is because in the Premier League, where these line judges usually reside, there is VAR, and so the practice is to give the goal and then raise the flag once VAR has checked it. So potentially there's some kind of sense that line judges are now immune to making the decision straight away because they're so used instinctively to having VAR there. And it wasn't given.
Removal of responsibility.
The flag came down.
Yeah.
And
so people must be going crazy.
Going bonkers. Well, Manchester United were ironically saved by VAR last year. Man United won the FA Cup last year, and they're playing against Coventry City, who are in the Championship, in the semi-final at Wembley. And Coventry City thought they'd won it in the last minute, and VAR, by the narrowest of margins, by a toenail, judged that the Coventry striker was offside.
So why do they not have VAR in this round?
They can't afford it.
Yeah, because up until the fifth round, you're right. So
is that right?
Because only Premier League grounds, only the Premier League in terms of the league structure in the football pyramid, only Premier League has VAR, and so they wait until the fifth round because by then the majority of the teams still in the competition are Premier League, so the grounds will have the infrastructure and be able to afford it. Whereas if you just have it all the way through the FA Cup, that is unsustainable financially because you've got so many grounds with a lot less infrastructure than you'd be used to in the Premier League.
Of course. OK, looking ahead. What else have we got?
Yeah, we've got 10 ties today, starting with Man City going to Leyton Orient, who are in League One. So Leyton Orient are 6th place in League One, and they're hosting Man City, which is one of the great things about the FA Cup. They've got two key players, Leyton Orient, who are on loan from Tottenham. So a goalkeeper called Josh Keeley, who actually scored a goal this season. He scored from a corner in stoppage time against Oldham. So he's hoping for another goal today.
Right, okay.
He's also saved lots of penalties to get them to this stage. He's looking forward to facing Erling Haaland and the greats of Man City. You've got Jamie Donnelly, who's a Tottenham midfielder. So Leyton Orient City's a great tie early on. Live on talkSPORT at 12:15. Everton Bournemouth, that's an all Premier League clash. Frank Lampard's Coventry against Ipswich. And then the late kick-off is Brighton, who got hammered 7-0 by Forest last week. They're taking on Chelsea. Brighton had high hopes for this season to sort of qualify for the Europa League, maybe even the Champions League. They will not do that now, given their league form. So the FA Cup is kind of their last chance to go from strength to strength as a club. So a big night for Brighton at home to Chelsea.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Six Nations, shall we?
Let's do that. Yes. Second week. England lost to Ireland last week, so if they don't win this week, they can't win the tournament. It's tough on England in terms of the fixtures because they're facing the two best teams in the two opening weeks. Losing away to Ireland, people probably expected that. England are in a funny place. They're probably 5th or 6th in the world. You've got a top 4 in rugby at the moment, a strong top 4 of New Zealand, South Africa, France and Ireland, who are above the rest. And England have played those teams about 8 or 9 times in the last few games, and they've only won 2 of their last 9 because they've just fallen short every time against that top tier. France are rocking. They've got a great side. Antoine Dupont's probably the best player in the world, maybe the best of all time, and he's kind of the magician, the Napoleon, if you will, commanding the troops at number 9 for France. So if France turn up, it could be a long day for England. But England are always there or thereabouts, and maybe they do have a performance in them against a big team, but they haven't got that winning formula. They've just been so unfortunate to lose very narrowly on all these occasions. So France are strong favourites, and then the game before that is Wales, Italy, and if Wales lose, it'll be their 14th loss in a row. Wales, once the greats of the Six Nations, now really struggling. So Wales really need a win, and Italy are favourites against Wales for the first time in a long time. So you've got Italy, Wales at 2:15, the later kick-off England, France at 4:45, and then tomorrow a big clash, Scotland, Ireland.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Will. Any questions for Raj?
I see quite a few Premiership footballers, actually.
Yeah.
You were a bit surprised when I said that.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. What's the main thing that...
But I'm not really allowed to disclose that.
in general, naming no names.
What I can tell you is they're like old married couples. They fall out with each other on the field. They refuse to pass to each other.
Yeah.
We have to try and get them to actually pass the ball to each other sometimes.
That's extraordinary. There's a book in there.
There really is.
There really is.
With a lot of crossings out.
Well, exactly. Yes, of course. He has to keep their details confidential. Thanks ever so much.
No problem.
Really good to see you. Let's, Raj, very quickly, I do want to... there's a story about Holly, isn't there? But just before you bring that up, let me just read a couple of messages out as well. Good morning, David. This is Joanna in Salisbury. The reason why Labour have many people still willing to vote for them is they're the ones who got pay rises. They are union-based. No other idiot would vote for them. David, Becky in Devon says, why does Labour hate the middle classes? Also, has anyone in Labour actually had an economics course? You will never tax your way to economic growth. Thank goodness I'm a dual national. If Labour continue this way, I'm going to head back to Trump's America. Becky, thank you. Dr. Raj, Holly Willoughby.
Yes, I brought this up because I thought it might help you with your negotiations over your own pay here.
Yes, good idea.
I thought it would help, put some pressure on talkTV.
Going terribly well.
The headline is, telly favourite Holly Willoughby bagged the equivalent of £40,000 for every minute she was on screen in Celebrity Bear Hunt. So I thought that might help you. I mean,
Celebrity Bear Hunt?
Yeah, obviously, in private practice, I thought when I read £40,000 for every minute, I thought, is that all?
Yes,
anyway,
exactly.
Yeah.
In the Street of Shame where you work.
Yeah. It says later on, Holly is a huge talent and very popular with viewers. Well, David, you should think about that. Plus, she has decades of experience presenting big TV shows, particularly live TV, which requires a level of excellence few presenters have. I've worked with Holly. I've worked with you. I know what they mean.
What do they mean, right? I'm not sure you're welcome back. Right, I mean, good cash, though.
Yeah, absolutely. £40,000 a minute.
To go and hunt a bear, if that's what Bear Hunt is about, I assume it is.
Yes.
Have you seen Celebrity Bear Hunt?
No, I haven't. No.
I haven't either. Right, just a few more quick messages as well. Good morning, David and Raj. You guys make my weekend. That's very kind, isn't it? Thank you very much for that. I think those still voting Labour in surveys are the same ones suffering Ramona syndrome. That's quite interesting. David, won't it be interesting when there's a by-election, as there will be during this Parliament, to see if the polls are correct? Would Reform gain another MP? Well, that's interesting. We saw a Labour councillor coming across to Reform yesterday, and that was in Ashfield, actually, Lee Anderson's seat.
I don't like it when people move because you're popular. I think it's much better when they move when you're unpopular. That shows real
intent, doesn't it? Yeah, absolutely, and alignment of values and all that kind of stuff as well. Lots more coming in. Good morning, David. I'm loving Raj. What a joy to listen to him. I could listen to him all day. Common sense, funny and stylish. We need to stop apologising to these countries. I don't see Spain or Portugal or anyone else giving out trillions. Brilliant point. Labour needs to look after their own. That's Anne. Raj, our time is up.
Thank you very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Who are you playing tennis against?
Various people. I will not disclose.
Are they famous?
Some of them are. I'm not popular on the tennis court because I get a bit grumpy if I'm losing.
I know one of them.
Yes, I know that you know one of them.
Yeah.
She always shouts yours when the ball's clearly hers.
Yeah.
And then when I go, but I won't say who, it was yours. She just laughs at me. She goes,
I know her. Yeah. She's quite fierce. Raj, thank you ever so much. Really good to see you. So much more still to come. Don't go anywhere. This is Weekend Breakfast. A very good morning to you.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 8 o'clock on Saturday, February the 8th. This is Weekend Breakfast. I'm David Bell. A very good morning to you. If you are just waking up, great news for you, because today you've got a great excuse. It's Global Movie Day today. It's a day celebrated every year on the second Saturday of February during Oscar season. The idea behind it encourages you to watch a movie, or as I like to call it, a film, because I'm British, and also to enjoy a good old-fashioned celluloid story. Yes, that is right. It's Global Movie Day.
And action!
Quite. You should see what they're doing behind the glass in front of me. Also today is International Scotch Day. Yummy. A day celebrating Scotland's finest export. Did you know, actually, the origins of Scotch whisky date back to the 15th century? So I say bottoms up. That is a big whiskey. Also, today is Laugh and Get Rich Day. It's a day where you can have a giggle, enjoy the many benefits that a good laugh has on your health. Actually, laughing makes you happier, it lowers stress levels, it strengthens your immune system. So, time to laugh.
I'm a laughing no and you can't catch me.
Now, that's David Bowie, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there you go. I know my stuff. Right, let's move on to today's and this hour's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
Now, on this day in 1601, Robert Devereux, the second Earl of Essex, rebelled against Queen Elizabeth I. Now, the revolt was quickly crushed. Essex was found guilty of treason and was beheaded on Tower Green on the 25th of February, 1601. This is an interesting fact. He was the last person to be beheaded in the Tower of London. Apparently, it took 3 strokes by the executioner, Thomas Derrick, to complete the beheading. That's nice. On this day in 1886, a peaceful demonstration by unemployed people started in Trafalgar Square and turned into a riot with looting in Oxford Street and Pall Mall. I love this one. In 1971, at the Nuremberg International Toy Fair, a British plastics firm making educational toys was actually shown a board game which had been rejected by established companies. It was a board game which was actually invented by an Israeli telecommunications expert. The game was taken on by Invicta Plastics, a British firm. It was renamed Mastermind. It's sold, and I played this as a child, actually. Did you play that as a child? Yeah, it was good, wasn't it? You had to guess the colours. Yeah. They sold 55 million sets of it in 80 countries. It was the most successful new game of the 1970s. Ooh, let's play Mastermind. Those were this hour's fascinating facts.
Weekend breakfast, let the good times roll. With friends all around, we're feeling whole. In the kitchen, laughter fills the air. David Bull leading, we haven't a care.
Well, a very good morning to you. 6 minutes past 8, Saturday, February the 8th. The weather, terrible. Stay in bed. Right, this morning, lots to get through this morning if you are just waking up. Let me just show you this, because I keep being told by the Labour government there is no money. We had a 20 billion hole. Then, of course, they had a budget which raised more money. Now they're going to pay the Chagos Islands billions of pounds, 15 billion pounds on top of that. Now they're going to talk to Caribbean islands about paying reparations for slavery. Not just a little bit of money, no, it adds up to 18 trillion pounds. Barbados wants 3.9 trillion. Now that's interesting, isn't it? We'll talk about that later on. Also, Wes Streeting says the NHS is too reliant on migrants coming to this country. This is a shocking story, actually. So many brilliant, bright UK medics pass their exams, try and get a job in the NHS. They are passed over for immigrants coming into this country who are, I would argue, are less well qualified, don't have a grasp of English, and that is paramount when you have a consultation. I think Many of you will know that when you see someone who you see a consultant, you might see a clinician who doesn't have English as a primary language. It can be very difficult indeed. Also, another story here. Ed Miliband is going to announce billions in subsidies for wood-burning power plants. How does that add up with your net zero stuff? OK, moving on to the Times this morning. A big alarm over diversity push. Yes, that's right. They're going to change the way that universities are funded so that you have more diversity, equality and inclusion. That makes no sense at all when you see what they're doing over the pond. This is the front page of the FT this morning because Accenture is the latest company to ditch diversity, inclusion and equality. Julie Sweet, she's the chief executive, says they are going to sunset its diversity goals. They are joining Meta, McDonald's and Target in ditching DEI goals. David Lammy making some more headlines as well. We'll also talk about Rachel Reeves' budget. We've got this story in the Express. Reeves' tax raid hurts British farms. This is Countryfile host Adam Henson has said this goes too far too fast. I'm paraphrasing there. And the Daily Mail, now the Chancellor's got eyes on your cash ISA. That's right, she's after your cash. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Keep all of these messages coming in. Andy in Coventry, good morning to you. David. Good morning, DB. Is there a day of the year that isn't a day celebrating anything? No, there isn't. Good morning, David and Raj. He's gone now. So much for this black hole. By the time Labour have finished, it will be the Grand Canyon. That's Brian in Worthing. Thank you for that. Loads of other messages coming in. I'm asking about Labour. So I thought Labour says there's no cash, so they're really harming pensioners, they're going after the farmers, they're going after employers with employers' national insurance contribution, they're going after people who send their kids to private schools. But apparently it's OK because we can fund the Chagos Islands and throw billions at them, and now we can pay reparations. Your thoughts, please. Got me thinking this morning. Has Labour got its spending priorities right? 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. But now it's time for Transatlantic Talk.
Transatlantic Talk with Caroline Faraday.
Yeah, Caroline Faraday. Hello.
Well, hello there. You know what? I always look forward to speaking to you, but this spot has started to make me so anxious.
Why?
Because it's just coming at me so fast all the time.
There's a lot of news, isn't there? Can I just ask you a really pertinent question? Did you play Mastermind as a child? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, but you said it was in the 70s. I'm an 80s.
Oh, you
kid,
are. You're a
I?
youngster,
Sorry
aren't you?
to do that for you. Sorry.
Right.
I'm not a youngster, David.
You are. You're younger than me.
Neither of us can claim that.
So, OK, we'll gloss over the fact that I'm really old. Let's move on. You said there is actually a lot of news coming out of the United States. Where would you like to start this morning?
Honestly, with my head under the covers, pretending none of it's happening, which is mainly what's going on, I think, for anyone here who's just like, really, there's more? Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's start with a few little highlights. One of those, actually, is, of course, Netanyahu was in the White House meeting with Donald Trump this week. Quite a few news lines out of that, as you saw. But the sort of daily development is that it's kind of come to a bit of a head with the International Criminal Court. In that Trump has said, well, they set this dangerous precedent because the International Criminal Court issued a arrest warrant for Netanyahu for war crimes, and Trump isn't very pleased about that. By the way, Joe Biden also wasn't best pleased about that. He called it outrageous even during his. So this is a sort of cross political stance about that charge, but Trump has gone as big step further, and what we're seeing is this sort of heavy-handed approach of sanctions against people in the International Criminal Court from Trump, where he's sort of sanctioned people. Now that could impact them financially, or their visas, or their travel, or various things. And so, this is essential work and, all these kind of things. So basically, it's all going down with another great big international organisation, because what we've seen from Trump is him take on these big international organisations, whether that's WHO or, I'm sure that NATO is next on the list. But But, you know, it's another international organisation that, you know, Trump is displaying enormous amounts of contempt for. Well, I think that plays quite well to his base, really.
Well, it will. So Trump accuses them of illegitimate and baseless actions. I think it is worth saying the ICC obviously is a global court, but the US and Israel not members of the ICC. I think something like 120 countries are. A stinging rebuke from Ursula von der Leyen from the European Union. Also, we're members of that as well. To be fair to the ICC, they issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, also an arrest warrant for a Hamas commander as well. They're standing by their arrest warrants. They also issued arrest warrants for Putin over the war crimes in Ukraine. They issued them from Taliban leaders for persecuting Afghan girls and women. So it's quite interesting, this. I think, for me, the most interesting thing about this, and not from a US perspective, is the fact that you've now got divergence from the US and the EU, and this is going to be the next big battleground as well, because, of course, Trump is threatening tariffs on the EU as well, and the EU has not reacted well to that either.
No. This is all part of his kind of isolationist pulling away from all of these big global organisations, and sort of it's one thing to say I disagree with this, but it's a real big step up to say we're going to sanction it, we're going to really take some quite serious steps against those against the organisation, and the US's position is that Netanyahu, I mean, yes, the International Criminal Court also issued arrests for other people, but they see that as being kind of an equivalency with Netanyahu, and that's what they take exception to. But this kind of big step up, like you said, the European Council President said that the sanctions undermine the international criminal justice system as a whole. And that's a reasonable stance to say, and possibly that is his goal.
I think you're right about the NATO thing. That's also one to watch. So we talked about Trump turning the Middle East into, what did you say, the Riviera was the word that was used. How did that go down in the United States? I think a lot of people here were pretty incredulous.
Yeah, I think people were as surprised, nobody more surprised, I think, than his chief of staff, if you actually watch her face when he says it. Trump does have this habit of somewhat making up policy on the hop, and he has slightly backtracked.
Yes.
And kind of not mentioned it again, and just, I think, is hoping everybody will forget it. But I'm sure a couple of weeks ago, when we were chatting, I said, next thing it will be, Trump resort Gaza, and then, sure enough, that's what he announced.
Well, and of course, I mean,
it is quite a Trump thing to just kind of start a sentence without knowing where it's going.
Well, no, but also it's such a Trump thing. I know, if in doubt, build a resort with a Trump hotel in it. It kind of feels like that. And then you're right. So initially he said Palestinians would be displaced, and now he's saying, well, we would only displace them as long as we take to rebuild it, and then they would be allowed back in. So that's a pretty massive shift in policy, and I assume lots of people were talking to him.
And now he's saying no American boots on the ground. But also bear in mind that Trump, of course, is a real estate developer with a history of not paying his contractors. So the whole thing is quite problematic in terms of the actual plan and then the execution of the plan. But we'll see.
We'll see. I mean, it is fascinating. You won't know this, but here in these papers, you may have heard me just going through them, the DEI stuff. Of course, Trump has said, right, no more DEI. It's a waste of time and money. We've got university funding being affected here. They're going to have more DEI. But the UK firms are now starting to follow suit, which is fascinating. They're now cutting away, Accenture being the latest one, to say, right, we're sunsetting our DEI. We were talking about this, Raj and I, earlier. Look, I think companies need to recruit the best and the brightest, and I think forced quotas is never a good thing. Yes, of course we want people who reflect different parts of society, but you also want the best people. It's fascinating. There's that great expression, when America sneezes, Britain catches a cold. Couldn't be truer.
Yeah, I'm sure these companies have been absolutely desperate to get rid of anything that costs them, a bit of extra money. I'm sure it doesn't, it doesn't displease them to be able to get rid of those things. I think the thing that people find really quite obnoxious about it is the idea that included in that is maybe you know, schemes and programs that perhaps help people who do need, you know, a bit more support in the workplace to be part of the workplace. And the idea of kind of dressing that up as we're not hiring the best of the best, whereas actually what we're saying is we're making sure that there are programs where people who, I don't know, might have autism can, you know, be employed in the workplace and not get looked over and not get stepped over and have accommodations made. And that seems like an important thing to do for society as a
Well, I just wonder whether we have come on so far. I mean, I used to do training in DEI many years ago, but we were in a very different situation then, when people didn't hire people with different abilities. I do think companies are much better at it, and maybe we don't need forced mandates. I'm not asking you to comment, because that is not your responsibility. Should we talk about this, though, because this will have resonance with our audience? Trump has signed an order banning transgender women from female sports.
Yeah, look, this is something that he's done that it will play very well, actually, really cross-party. He signed this order banning transgender women in women's sports. That is something that has been very controversial, talked about. In reality, it probably affects about 10 athletes. You know, but it is something that has been, you know, a topic for conversation, and I think that people, you know, find it a good position to support the idea that, you know, women's sports exist to take away that extra advantage that men have in the sporting field. So it has been a debate, and people have, you know, the athletics, college athletics here have sort of followed suit. And yeah, that is something that he's signed on. But also, this is a very popular kind of distraction from the fact that, as I said, life is coming at America fast. So yes, he is. He's surrounded by all these athletes, this wonderful photo opportunity that, as you say, I think, you know, a lot of people will support. Whilst in the background, he's, you know, I just looked at the USA Aid website. It is closed down, you know, while you're axing government departments, while you're axing entire programs around the world that help people, but saying, ta-da, look at this shiny thing, though, that we did that you all like. So it is something of a distraction, but yes, it is something, I think, that that had been on people's, you know...
I mean, it's the art of politics, isn't it? Look over here.
Yes, it's very much the art of politics, that one.
I mean, it's interesting, actually. He says he will deny visas for transgender Olympic athletes trying to visit the US for the LA Games. He says the war on women's sports is over. He also says, I will deny any or all visa applications made by men attempting to fraudulently enter the United States while identifying themselves as women athletes. Pretty punchy.
It is pretty punchy, but how many people does it really affect, David,
well,
honestly?
Yes, that is true indeed. And, of course, this is about the optics of what he's doing. Let's move on, shall we? I just want to talk about this, the Alaska flight. I don't think people will know this story here. Do you want to just explain what's happened?
Well, it went missing, and, you know, obviously there's been a lot of focus really on air safety following the crash in Washington, D.C. And this was a flight that was in Alaska, much smaller aircraft, passenger aircraft. But yes, they found the remains of that flight now. And so obviously they'll be looking into the reasons why that came down, why that had that. But, you know, passengers obviously, you know, not survived that air crash. So yet another disaster, another air disaster in the US at a time when air safety really is something that people are very focused on.
It's very sad. So 10 people have died. It was a regional airline, wasn't it?
Yeah, like one of those, you know, it's all little islands, isn't it, up there? So it's one of like a much smaller aircraft than we were talking about with DC, but an absolute tragedy nonetheless.
Shocking, absolutely shocking. Very odd as well that they didn't have the emergency transmitter, which they all have and normally is activated when they hit salt water, wasn't activated. So questions remain over that, but very sad story indeed. On a better note, shall we talk? God, do you know, I remember talking about this this exact subject with you a year ago, so that just shows how old we are. Super Bowl. Now, when I lived in the States, it's a game I don't understand. It goes on for about 3 weeks. No one's interested as far as I can see. They play a bit, don't they? And then there's a little interval, and then they play a bit, and there's an interval. Everyone wants to know who the half-time act is.
That's exactly it. Well, apart from now, the Super Bowl, there's this added interest, of course. Travis Kelce, who is Taylor Swift's boyfriend, and Kansas City Chiefs are once again, actually, in the Super Bowl final. They used to be absolute disasters, and now they're there like 3 times running. They're playing the Philadelphia Eagles. Don't ask me any more than that. Don't ask me the rules. I think it's basically rugby, with loads more, but with a lot more padding and a lot more stops
and more singing
and a lot more money. And so anyway, the halftime show is the big show. And this year it is the turn of Kendrick Lamar. It's the first time a solo rapper has done... You say that, but he won 5 Grammy Awards.
He may have done. I've no idea who he is.
Yeah. Look, I'm not hugely familiar with most of his works. But he is somebody who's well thought of in the rap world.
Right.
You know...
Isn't it a weird...
Like
hang
a
on a
nice
minute.
enough guy.
If you... He's a nice guy. Listen, if you're going to book this act, and they normally have massive acts, don't they, for the entertainment here, I wouldn't have said rap is all-encompassing.
Yeah, look, here's what's interesting. Well, number one, he's had a very successful year. So if he's going to do it any year, it's this year.
Sure.
But I suspect, and I am throwing this out there with not a lot of expertise, but they have had a lot of issues, really, in the past with the NFL, and racism and various kind of to and froms with that. So I suspect it is pretty good optics as well to try and bring in perhaps fans of rap music to watch the Super Bowl and enjoy the Super Bowl. I suspect there is, that is part of the appeal. But look, there he is with all his Grammys. So, he's definitely worthy of being there. He just might not be what you listen to.
No, he's definitely not one.
For that matter.
Well, no, indeed. But maybe it's all in the staging, isn't it? And also it's a show. At the end of the day, it's a show.
It's a show, isn't it? But I mean... I'd really enjoyed it when Lady Gaga did it. Could she just do it again?
No, and also, are you going to a viewing party? Because that's the thing, isn't it?
That is what they do. They sit around, they eat chicken wings. Why? There's no meat on them. It's just a vehicle for, like, weird sauce. And they eat dips. And then there's a load of commercials on the television. And seriously, no one knows how long the game's going to take. This is the weirdest thing about the Super Bowl. So no, I won't be watching it. I'll be driving around just freely on all the freeways, so excited that no one's on them.
Oh, very good indeed. I remember going to a friend's house, actually, and it just went on for hours and hours and hours. I had no idea what was going on. Never ending. And then you just have to ask a few questions every so often. I'll tell you the one little interesting note about it is it's being held in New Orleans. And of course, New Orleans had that awful terror attack on New Year's Eve. So it is a bit of a boost, but obviously sort of security is one to watch with it. So that is just a little aside. Lovely. Yes. Well, Caroline, you enjoy the freeways and your newfound freedom. Thanks.
I say freeways now. Sorry, motorways.
Yeah, motorway. Well, they're not really, are they? Freeways. I was thinking how bad the road surface is on a freeway, but anyway, that's a whole nother conversation that we can have another time. Caroline, always a great pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. That was today's Transatlantic Talk.
Transatlantic Talk with Caroline Faraday.
Good morning, Dr. Bull. This is Robert Hensher. Good morning to you, Dr. Hensher. Now, Dr. Bull, it was so nice to see Dr. Persaud this morning. I had the pleasure of sitting next to him at a medical dinner some years ago. Everyone was very senior, and as a simple surgeon, I was out of my depth, but he was refreshingly sensible and amusing company. Oh, to have colleagues like him. I absolutely agree, and we love having him on the programme. Thanks ever so much for that, Robert. Good morning, David. This is Tony in Manchester. This government, in inverted commas, just wants to tie us into things so that when they get kicked out, they will have a legacy and they can sit back and point score when we try and undo the damage that they have actually done. Labour seems hell-bent, says Alison, good morning to you, on giving away money we don't have and taking us all to hell in a handcart. It beggars belief. That's Alison in Richmond. This is Sean in Gloucester. I honestly don't know, David, how Labour manages it. Every single day they come up with yet another lunatic idea which is wrong, anti-British, harmful to the population, which makes us poorer. We are heading for bankruptcy at light speed with these morons in charge. We must get Nigel in now, in capital letters, or we will be broken Britain forever. Keep all of those messages coming in. I'm asking this morning, do you think Labour has actually got its spending priorities right? The number 0344 499 1000. Those calls are charged at the national rate. Time for a break. After the break, it's our head-to-head. Joining me this morning, Noah Kigali, who's a Conservative councillor for Strathern, and joining him, Jim Dale, meteorologist and author. All still to come. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. What a beautiful name. The Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, Canada and the United States, that would really be something. All hell will break out in the Middle East, and it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Weekend Breakfast 8:31, Saturday, February the 8th. I'm David Bull. So many messages coming in. I'm asking this morning, do you think Labour has got its spending priorities right? This is based on the front page, where was it, of the Telegraph this morning. So essentially 20 billion black hole, then we have a budget to raise even more money, 20 billion on top of that, then 15 billion or 18 billion for the Chagos Islands, now trillions of pounds in slavery reparations. whilst our pensioners freeze, whilst companies are laying off people because of employers' national insurance contribution, whilst the farmers are in trouble and going marching tomorrow, also clobbering parents with VAT on independent school fees, has Labour got its policy spending priorities right? The number 0344 499 1000. Many of you getting in touch over this with regards to the Labour government. So many of you getting in touch about it. Good morning, Dr. David. This is Brittany here in the United States. Hell no. Labour doesn't have its spending priorities straight, just like the Democrats here in the USA didn't. And now Elon Musk and Trump are having to clean up the garbage. I love your show. That's very kind. Thank you. It makes me smile from your energy. That's Brittany in the sunny United States. Good morning, David. Margaret's still in Tunisia. Margaret, good morning. It's obvious this useless government doesn't give a damn about Britain or the British people. They may have degrees. Economics? Anyone got an economics degree? But that doesn't mean to say they're intelligent. Tony Blair has so much to answer for. I'll never forgive him for the damage he started. And this Labour government will finish if they're allowed to get away with it. Keep all of those messages coming in. But now it's time for Head to Head.
Head to Head.
Well, joining me this morning, I'm delighted to say he's back again, Noah Kigali, Conservative Councillor for Strathern, and joining him, Jim Dale, meteorologist and author. Good morning to the two of you. Good
morning. How are you?
Really good to see you. Shall we start with this big story this morning? And I mentioned it this morning, Jim, about the 20 billion black hole. Then we have the budget, all the stuff that I said, and then we're talking about giving 18 billion to the Chagos Islands. Now we're going to give trillions of pounds, or maybe in terms of reparations. The previous Conservative government said we are not going. This is the front page of the Daily Telegraph. The previous Conservative government said we are not talking about reparations in the slightest, and now Lammy is opening the door to that. And of course, Barbados wants a significant sum of money. What was it? 3.9 trillion. The Caribbean or former Caribbean colonies, they value the reparation bill at 18 trillion pounds. Where do you stand?
It won't be happening. It won't be happening because we haven't got that sort of money. And even if we did, I don't think it would be going in that direction necessarily. That isn't that there isn't a claim of sorts in terms of what happened in the past. I think we can all agree that some of the things that went on a few hundred years ago weren't the right thing to do, and these people have been left adrift, but they've been left adrift too long, and sometimes you have to close the book. You have to say, you know, enough is enough, and we can't rewrite the past. We've all moved on from that. We have to do it in different ways, and we do that in different ways throughout the world in terms of giving aid to some of our former colonies, etc., and present colonies, in terms of them being able to get through poverty and or climate change and or other aspects. So, you know, I think we have to get real. It's a Telegraph story. I'm used to the Telegraph stories throwing grenades, and that's what they've done in this case.
Just before you jump in, Noah, you say a grenade. Let me just show you a clip of David Lammy. This is in 2020. This is what he said about reparations back in 2020.
I'm afraid, as Caribbean people, we are not going to forget our history. We don't just want to hear an apology, we want reparation.
Noah.
It's not going to happen. It's a weird policy focus now when they're floundering so much. And I'm also slightly concerned, given Labour's ability to negotiate or not negotiate over the Chagos, that whatever number that is demanded of David Lammy when he walks into the negotiation room, he's going to haggle them down to double the amount, and they also get Wales.
I mean, it's interesting here that David Lammy, on record saying we need reparations, he also says he's not British, he's Caribbean. David Lammy also not very good, one would say, with his past record of keeping everyone sweet. What did he call Trump? A neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath.
Look, this is part of the challenge for this Labour government now, is that they said a lot in opposition that they're having to roll back on, whether that's oil fields, whether that's Heathrow, which we'll talk about later, whether it's reparations. And the reality of being in government is very different to the reality of being in opposition and just being able to say whatever you want.
I think what you've seen there is David Lammy speaking from the heart, and then once you get into government...
What, in 2020, yeah.
Yeah, and once you get into government, things change, and you've got to think with your mind, and you're in a different position. So, as an opposition, you kind of oppose, and you put up the flags, and you put up the banners, and you do it in that way. And that's exactly what's happening now with say, Reform UK. They're doing very similar shouting from the rooftops, etc. So if they ever got into government, which I doubt very much, but if they ever did, Reform UK, leading in the polls. So I think we're going to talk about the polls at a certain point. The position will change. I already noticed, by the way, that because I had a lot of conversations with Nigel Farage, debates with Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, etc., in the past about climate change, that now they're kind of running away from it. Why?
What do you mean running away from it?
Well, not wishing to debate. Not wishing to... Have you heard, since Richard Tice was on the BBC, talking about volcanoes being the reason for for climate change, modern-day climate change? From that position to what we've now seen in LA, in Valencia, it's kind of... the events are overtaking them. Events are overtaking them.
I'm not sure that's true. Do you want to just answer that? You've taken me down a rabbit hole that I don't necessarily want to be down, but...
I kind of lost what the question was.
Well, no, so Jim was just basically saying that Reform UK, Richard Tice, has stepped away from net zero. I mean, it's very clear what Reform's policy, which is ditch net zero.
Yeah, I think the reality of our energy policy, it needs a significant amount of capital investment. We need to diversify our energy production, and we need to be realistic about...
OK. Well, in which case, answer me this. So, Mad Ed Miliband, this is his latest crazy scheme. He's now going to announce billions in subsidies for wood-burning power plants. What? Hang on a minute. I thought 1 minute you want net zero, then you're going to have windmills everywhere. Now you're going to burn wood, like cavemen.
This is part of the problem with... what is almost an accountancy trick with some of our energy production, where we pretend that energy imports essentially aren't as bad because we've not got the oil field. And that's incredibly counterproductive. We need significant investment in nuclear, especially in SMRs, because that is
happening.
Hopefully the future. Yeah, which is happening, which is one.
But we also think, Jim, I think they're going to approve Rosebank. I think.
Well, we will see.
So if
I wouldn't necessarily be in favour of this.
No, I know you wouldn't. But Noah's point is valid, which is I don't see an overall concerted energy strategy. It feels to me it's cobble it together.
It feels to me, and it is, a transition from where we were, the oil, the coal. Coal's gone. I mean, so that's your first step. Coal has gone, which is a great thing. Gas hasn't gone. Why hasn't it gone? Because we still need it at this moment in time. We still need oil, but it's a transition. It always will be, and it always was going to be.
I don't think anyone disagrees with that.
Yeah, but if you look at green energy, that's actually moving on a lot.
Why are we lumbering people with massive energy bills? Surely, in a transition, I would get everything up and running. Noah's SMRs, I'd have them up and running. I'd have everything ready to go before you. I wouldn't clobber people.
Where do you think the cost of those energy bills have come from? They've come from essentially natural gas being
rubbish,
really high in the market. Have a look at the commodity prices.
Rubbish.
Have a look at them.
Rubbish.
One of the biggest blockers at this stage is grid capacity, and the grid just isn't set up to be able to handle.
It will take time.
Look, it will take time. A lot of time and a lot of investment.
Nobody wants a world. I say nobody because I thought people about ULEZ as well, stood in the middle of London talking to opposition. ULEZ is now in. Pollution has gone down. It will be the same with renewables. We want a green
no difference
world.
In health outcomes. Let me just throw that at you in terms of your
I think that's yet to be seen.
I have to go to a break, Jim.
OK.
Just stay where you are. Noah and Jim will be back after this break.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. 8:43, Saturday, February the 8th. We're in the middle of Head to Head. I'm joined by Noah Kigali and also Jim Dale this morning. Should we talk, Noah, if we may, about, obviously there's an enormous amount of turbulence going on, but this is fascinating. Let me just show you this. This is Labour's latest attack line on Reform UK. The most interesting thing, and if we can show you this, this is about them saying how many people they have deported. Now, what do you notice about this, Noah? The fact is, there's no Labour branding on it. So they're saying they are hitting a 5-year high in migrant removals. No Labour branding, firstly. Secondly, I don't think they can do this, but they've done it in a Pantone colour, which is very similar, if not the same, as another political party, i.e. Reform UK.
Is this what their secret emergency cabinet meeting was about the other day? And then they've just sat there and done this on Canva or something? Look, ultimately, is it going to turn the tide of the way that people are feeling about the Labour government? No. Is it going to partially, quell some people's concerns that they're not doing anything on illegal migration? Perhaps. But I think the biggest issue that they have to tackle is that the people that are most concerned about this are concerned because they're seeing it in their communities. And if Labour can't make them feel like something's changing in those communities, then they won't get anywhere. It doesn't matter what the reality is. This is mostly a perception game for Labour at this stage.
What does it say, Jim, when you don't put the logo of your party on it, when you have an ad?
It says the boxing clever. What they're doing. Yeah, I do think it's clever.
Hang on a minute, isn't it passing off?
Remember, we're not in election time at this moment in time, so you're entitled to put out what you want. Now, what they're doing, Reform have been throwing bricks, if you like, big bricks, and they're aiming at, generally speaking, people who are, I use the word advisedly, not necessarily overly educated. In other words, lower echelons. And what Labour are doing is throwing bricks back. In other words, doing the same kind of trick, if you like. Call it that. Call it a game. Call it a war. Call it what you like. But they're fighting fire and fire with fire. So in other words, they're doing the exact type of advertisement as Reform have been doing against the Labour government.
Can I just double check?
That's what's saying.
Did I hear you correctly? Are you basically saying that people voting for Reform or backing Reform aren't very bright?
I'm not saying that. There's polls out that say that, actually. I'm not saying it. I'm saying I'm following the polls that actually say that the majority, the people, the education value in this country in terms of the top and the bottom, the majority at the bottom follow Reform. And that's not me saying it, that's a national
just
poll.
Just because someone doesn't have a degree doesn't mean that they're not capable of independent political...
I'm not saying that. Yeah.
But I want to hear from you, because I also would then... The counter-argument is, these are the people who work really hard, who struggle to put food on the table. They're sick and tired of what's happening in this country, and maybe that's why they're voting, is because they want change.
Yeah, that's the same rhetoric. Look, during the Brexit referendum, I heard people make a similar argument. Look, I was very young at the time, but it left an impression on me. Yeah, just get your man in there. But it was the same argument that people made. And just because you don't have a degree doesn't mean that you are, not capable of objective political thought or thinking through policy issues. Those two things are not the same, and it's important that we differentiate.
Let me just show you the latest polls, if I can. If you have just joined us, it's 8:45 now. Let's look at the first poll. This is Find Out Now, and it is pretty seismic what we have seen. So this is the poll that shows that out in front for the very first time, 29%, is Reform UK, up 2 points. Labour on 25 points. Conservatives on 18, down 3 points. Interestingly, Labour's gone up 2 points, which I find absolutely extraordinary. Lib Dems on 13%, Greens on 10. We'll bring you that poll, hopefully, as soon as we can. That is the first poll. We've then got a second poll as well, which is from YouGov, which pretty much says the same. What's going on, Noah?
I think this is what you tend to see in the early years.
There we go. There's YouGovs for you. Sorry. So Reform... I mean, this is pretty interesting. 25 for Reform. You can read it for yourselves, but... Noah.
Look, I don't think this is something that will last through to the next election.
You hope.
Yeah, I've said this to you before. I don't have a huge amount of faith that Nigel Farage is capable of holding a party together for that long and running a proper election campaign, whilst also growing the size of a party that much. It's something that requires not the skills that Nigel Farage has become famous on. You have to have a policy platform, and that's not something that's been his expertise. Fundamentally, he is good at leading populist movements.
Nigel Farage is not head of the policy unit, and there are people there, and Zia Youssef is a strategic businessman.
But people know Nigel Farage.
Sure.
He's the face. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I've heard you criticise Kevin Badenoch a lot. It doesn't mean that CCHQ don't exist. It's...
Nigel Farage, until the Reform Party, until they adopted Nigel Farage as the leader during the election campaign, were nowhere until they did so.
Well, that's not true.
So really,
that's not true, because when I was there with Richard Tyson, we were on 2%. We grew it to about 7-8%. When Nigel came on, it then grew exponentially.
But 7-8% isn't going to get you anywhere in politics.
No, indeed. But also, Reform UK is a very young party.
Mm-hmm. But as Noah's already said, this is very early days. I mean, come back in 4 years. Things tend to change. You've got... The one thing you will say is 6 months of a Labour government is not enough to turn around the crash that happened under Truss and Johnson before. So it's going to take time, and I think people are aware of that. Yes, they're impatient. Yes, things are going on. It's not easy decisions that are being made at this moment in time. I think you've got to give the opportunity for them to spell out what they're doing, to actually make it.
What are they doing?
I think they're going through difficult times at this moment in time, but I think they're going in the right direction with several areas.
Tax?
Potentially, yeah, absolutely. In terms of the farmers, absolutely. In terms of their private schools, it's not going to destroy farms. No, it's not.
Destroying farms, destroying private schools, destroying aspiration, massive taxation.
All they're doing there is bringing the farmers into what everybody else has got to do. It's the same. You know, in other words, making it neutral across the board.
Look, Labour's policy platform has been abysmal so far. They've managed to somehow annoy lots of the Labour base. I appreciate you don't seem to be annoyed, but they're annoying a lot of the Labour base as well as the rest of the country. And I'm not entirely sure who is supposedly actually really happy with this policy platform, especially when you look at something like the taxation on private schools. That is quite obviously an attack on aspiration, and also an attack on lots of those special needs young people that were relying on private schools because, you know, state schools just couldn't provide the support they needed. Those are the people that are being attacked by this Labour government.
OK, pause, gentlemen. We'll continue after this break.
But the thing that I find troubling, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Kevin, is that, you know, when the police were initially asked about this, they said, we're not going to investigate it because nobody's complained. And then, a day later, when obviously people did complain, they said, oh, we're not going to investigate it because apparently it's out of time. Well, you know, why didn't they just say that the first time around?
Well, I think it's really important that everybody's treated equally before the law.
Yeah.
And we saw this action taken against certain individuals within our party, Boris and others, which people will have different views upon.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. We're in the middle of Head to Head. This is quite interesting. Rachel Reeves, of course, there's this thing where Rachel Reeves has said, actually, the economy trumps net zero, and she has made this very clear repeatedly. Rachel Reeves has told Ed Miliband she's prepared to move further and faster to promote growth with projects like the third runway at Heathrow. They had this 6-hour away day, God, that sounds thrilling, on Friday, and now the net zero secretary, Ed Miliband, seems to have backtracked. He wasn't there when they made the announcement about the third runway, but no, he now says, oh, it's collective responsibility. I back a third runway at Heathrow.
Do you know what it feels like? You know when children apologise and they walk up to you and they go, oh yeah, my mum and dad told me to say sorry? And you know it's not genuine, but they've had to say it in public anyway.
Well, to be fair to him, he did say, apparently, he was in that meeting and showed displeasure about it, but maybe he's right. Maybe it is collective responsibility.
No, well, yeah, I quite like that we've gone back to a traditional cabinet rules where everyone kind of has to get on the same page. But it does make me question how long he'll last, because it's a pretty big backtrack from him on his previous position. And I've said since the beginning that Ed Miliband as Designated Secretary made sense at the start, but I don't know about the long-term future of it, because he does seem to be quite far from the objectives, if not the actions, of this government on a number of levels.
You know, something you said, Jim, earlier, I think most people do want a cleaner environment, right? But it's about the timeline. I'm listening to Boris Johnson's book Unleashed at the moment. They had this arbitrary number, and 2030 seems pretty arbitrary. But surely I go back to this thing where you want to build the SMRs, get them up and running first. Keir Starmer's changed his position on SMRs as well. You've got Ed Miliband saying let's burn wood. You've then got windmills and great big pylons going across East Anglia, where I live, which people are very unhappy about. On top of that, we've now got this change from Miliband in terms of what they're doing. Is there a cohesive strategy behind this?
Well, you mentioned economic and net zero, or let's just say climate change, in other words, doing progressive things towards that. I actually disagree, because I think net zero, I think that what you're seeing from LA to Valencia to floods in Thailand to record temperatures going off at this moment in time to the record January 1.7 degrees globally, above the IPCC level, going in one direction only, means that in the end, climate is going to overtake economics. It will start to impact massively, and that's not me speaking. That's Deloitte.
Even if okay, so I'll take that point. But we contribute 1% of global emissions, right? Meanwhile, those economies like China, like India, building coal-fired power stations. So why are we doing this and making our citizens poorer?
Well, they're not building them; they're going to reduce them. And you're right at this moment in time. Yeah, look, China, the USA. India to a degree as well. All three of them are in the wrong place. Well, having said that, China is now heading both solar and wind power by a long way.
They're also building traditional power stations as well.
But they know economically that is going to be prosperous for them.
They're also building the parts for us to buy to install here.
Just to be really clear here, if you have a look at graphs of greenhouse gas emissions, look at China and compare it to the US. They are not the same thing at all. And we need to be really clear about that. The US greenhouse gas emissions have been coming down and China's have not been. And we need to be very, very careful about stunting our own economic growth, because ultimately it's that's going to be the thing that provides the innovations, the technological advancements that get us out of this mess. We all want to get out of it.
But we don't have to get out of it by creating more of a mess in terms of the environment and putting more fossil fuel emissions into the air. We need to start pulling away.
But
last we're not doing it. We're not doing it. The Chinese are going in the right direction.
What up? Look at a graph of greenhouse gas emissions.
You're missing my point. It's still a evolution. It's not a revolution.
I totally. But surely we need to make it affordable for people to adopt that transition. What I'm seeing is elderly people at home who've turned the heating off because they're too frightened to use it because the bills are massive.
Well, that's the winter allowance cut, isn't it? That's where it was. My old mum's in that position, to be honest with you. But you know, the certain thing. I think it's. I say this advisedly. I think it's exaggerated. I think it's pushed by the opposition in terms of saying that this is the worst thing that's ever happened. It's not the worst thing. People can do things in their own room to keep themselves warm, etc. You know, it is a case of managing that to a degree, even in a cold winter.
So my bill last month was £400. I don't even have heating on that. That's electricity.
Technological innovation is going to be what's in the long term going to bring those bills down, and the capital investment that's needed in the short term to make sure that the grid is doing all right.
Yeah.
But the crux here is we can't sit on our laurels, not invest and not innovate. That's going to be the thing that saves us. That's what we need to focus on.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Noah Kigali, Conservative Councillor for Strathern, and Jim Dale, meteorologist and author. That was today's Head-to-Head.
Head-to-Head.
Wow, that was loud in my ears. There we go. Lots more still to come this morning. We're going to be talking about the economy, actually. Is the UK actually headed towards a recession? Andrew Bailey, when the MPC announced the new interest rates, he actually blamed the bloated state. Another 500,000 people. 500,000 people! 500,000 people have joined the public sector. That doesn't seem very clever to me. Also, the bank has flunked its chance to stop a recession. I'm talking to Justin, I'm talking to Sally Mitchell, a mortgage advisor at the Mortgage Mum. That's all still to come. So, great advice coming up if you need to sort out your mortgage rate. This is Weekend Breakfast.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you just after 9 o'clock now on Saturday, February the 8th. If you've just joined us, where have you been? We've been on air for 3 hours. Thanks ever so much for your company this morning. Great news for you if you are just waking up, you lucky things. It's Global Movie Day today. It's celebrated every single year, actually. The second Saturday of February during Oscar season. It's the day which encourages you to watch a film, because we're British, and enjoy a good old-fashioned celluloid story. Yes, it's film day.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1, action.
Also, today is International Scotch Day. Now you're talking, a day celebrating Scotland's finest export. Did you know that actually the origins of Scotch whisky date back to the 15th century? Also, today is Laugh and Get Rich Day, a day where you can have a giggle, enjoy the many benefits of a good laugh on your health. And, of course, it makes you happier. Laughing makes you happy. It also decreases your stress levels, and it will strengthen your immune system. So go on, have a giggle.
I know a laughing policeman. He's always on our street. And everybody says he is the happiest man in town.
There you go, the laughing policeman. That'll get you in the mood. Right, let's move on to this hour's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
Some new ones for you. The Albert Hall management on this day in 1972 cancelled Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention concert because of the obscene lyrics of one of their songs. As a result, fans demonstrated outside the hall. On this day in 1998, the death of Enoch Powell, aged 85. Now, you may remember, of course, he warned in 1968 of the perils of immigration, high immigration, and he gave what is now called the Rivers of Blood speech. On this day in 2022, the death, aged 87, of Bamber Gascoigne. Now, you have to be a certain age to know who Bamber Gascoigne was. Dave knows in the box. Yes, very good, Dave. Of course, he was the original quizmaster of University Challenge. Talk about this for a job security. He did that job for 25 years. From 1962 until the end of the initial run in 1987. Whoa! Talk about a job for life. Those were this hour's fascinating facts.
Weekend mornings we're taking flight. With David Bull, everything feels right. Weekend breakfast, shining like the sun.
Good morning, 5 minutes past 9. I'm just jigging away to my own theme tune there. Good morning, this is Weekend Breakfast. If you are just waking up this morning, of course, we have no money. It's the Conservatives' fault. That's what Labour says the whole time. 20 billion hole, then there's a budget, and of course, they hammered everyone pretty much. And then we were just talking about climate change. Now, Labour is open to talking about reparations from our colonial past. I didn't think we had any money. Now, apparently, we've got trillions of pounds that we could give away to former colonial islands. Right. We've also got the Times front page. Alarm over diversity push. That's their story about the way universities are going to be funded because they need to have more diversity. That's weird because Trump in America has banned it. And this is the FT this morning, Accenture being the latest company to sunset their DEI policies as a result of what is going on globally. Your thoughts on that? Also, and I do want to mention this, and Jim Dale thought I was wrong to mention it, Rachel Reeves, of course, I think she's in trouble. Reeves' tax raid hurts British farms. This isn't me saying this. This is Countryfile host Adam Henson has told Rachel Reeves her tax raid hurts farming. He says it goes too far and it's too fast, which I think most people would actually agree with. Also, food security, I would argue, is paramount in this country, particularly when the global situation seems incredibly unstable. It's interesting, this, though. He says, my comments are apolitical. He then goes to say the Labour government inherited a mess and they're trying to sort that mess out the best they can. That, Adam, is political, whether you say it is political or not. Now, there is another big story, and Andrew Bailey is not someone, the Governor of the Bank of England, isn't someone who is known for his charisma. But I was watching him after the MPC meeting where they announced the interest rates, and there were a couple of things that he said which I thought was fascinating. He warns that Britain's bloated public sector is dragging down the economy. 500,000 more people work for the public sector. It's absolutely unbelievable, actually, that you've got 500,000 people joining the public sector. He says we've got all of these new workers, but there is no increase in productivity, so therefore that is not very good. And of course, we've got civil servants threatening to strike because they've been asked to do 2 days' work a week in the office. He also talks about migration, saying that the people coming to this country aren't net contributors on the whole to this country, and that will have an impact on what is going on. Now, also, just at the MPC meeting, which was on the 6th of February, interest rates were cut to 4.5%. There's something quite interesting going on in the voting, and I'm not the person to tell you that because that is not my area of expertise, but I know a man in red braces whose it is. Justin Urquhart-Stewart and his cat, Betty, I think it is, join us now. Good morning.
It is Betty.
It is Betty. Good morning, Justin. Look, can you try and unpack all of this? Because I think, let's talk about interest rates first of all. The economy not growing, growth forecast downgraded. Andrew Bailey, I thought that was pretty significant what he said. But then just in terms of what they did lower interest rates to 4.5%. But there was very mixed bag in terms of the voting of the MPC.
It was indeed. There's beginning to get. Hang on a second. Betty's complaining about the economy overall at the moment. Most upset the fact that things are getting slower. It's fascinating here because you're beginning to see a change, the realisation that actually the Bank of England can't just do everything. And the Bank of England can't just sit there and react to inflation going up and down. And actually, even though inflation is rising and is likely to continue to rise, that people realise they're going to have to take more dramatic action. Now, here you can learn something from President Trump, actually to take some more dramatic, not dramatic, but some realistic ideas as to how to actually change the economy's move. It's nothing particularly original, but actually taking some dramatic moves over seriously cutting the cost of money. I don't mean 0.25%, taking it down by 0.5%, maybe 1%, actually getting the idea back into people's minds that we can grow the economy. You can borrow money at a lower costs, and particularly, remember, the main driver of this is small businesses, getting some people to say, right, I'm going to have the courage to set up my small business. That means I'm probably going to put my house on the line or whatever it might be. It takes a lot of guts to be able to do so, but I can afford to be able to do that. I'm going to take that risk because I can see some growth coming through. The other bit you do is you get the private, as individuals, our prime asset is our house or flat or whatever it happens to be. So you get them, all of us, to say either we're going to be doing it up or we're going to be moving. Because if you move, the kitchen goes, the bathroom goes, and whatever else happens to disappear, and you spend money. And when you spend money, the government earns more income. Good heavens, it's astonishing me, this. And so the government gets more money coming through. So if you get more businesses set up, and for heaven's sake, not government businesses, not people employed by the state, but people who are productive, actually produce real value into the economy. And I would actually go about I have to say, I don't have too much time in actually sort of the way that the Doge is operating in the States. But nonetheless, it seems a serious issue. We have far too many people being employed by the state and justifying actually what they're there to do and are they being productive, and actually trying to replace that by productive businesses which are actually growing and actually creating profit and paying tax on the basis of that. That's how you start to help getting that change. How can the government do that? It doesn't have to spend a huge amount of money. There are lots of tax breaks, like enterprise investment schemes. You can get regional enterprise investment schemes. You could get actually local regions actually being able to start actually having their own bonds, to actually have their own infrastructure, like Manchester or Newcastle or whatever, to actually get more money focused on local development. Good heavens, the third runway? We've been talking about the third runway for 30 years. It's not going to happen. And all those ideas are yesterday's ideas. There is no one in that cabinet who's run a business. No one in the cabinet who's actually woken up in the morning and think, help? What am I going to do? How do I actually get this going? And so there are processes. What we need to be able to have is some people in there who really sort of understand, how do you get this going? And it's not actually, it's not easy, but actually the processes behind an economy are relatively straightforward in making sure you're getting more people who are going to be encouraged to put more money in, to go out and spend. And for one thing you need for that is confidence. If you can have confidence, then funny enough, things start changing.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And that point is very valid about no economic experience in the Cabinet whatsoever. I don't think Rachel Reeves is on top of her brief in the slightest. And you can't have another 500,000 people added to the public sector and productivity going down. It's interesting, there was an article in the Telegraph about Andrew Bailey, and actually I welcome what he said. But there is also this real concern that we've downgraded our growth rates from 1.5% to 0.75%. That is a massive warning sign. The Telegraph article talks about Bailey and says actually he is part of the problem because he's sitting on a salary of 500,000. Actually, his department has gone up, so he's employing more people at the same time. It just seems there's this enormous profligacy going on.
There was also the idea that somehow that the Bank of England can actually solve things. The Bank of England actually does not necessarily have to control interest rates. That was just an idea of Gordon Brown. And when you actually think about it, who actually controls interest rates on that? Well, it's the people in the Bank of England who are appointed and approved by the Treasury. The people actually who are the guests on there have to be approved by the Treasury, and the Governor of the Bank of England, who's approved by the Treasury. But apart from that, it's completely independent. So what you need to be able to have there is actually not just the Bank of England, but actually business people in there as well, understanding what gets things moving in different areas of the country. They vary all over. We focus far too much on London. We know full well that actually, if you actually put some real power into areas such as we see in Manchester, but also do the same up in Newcastle, there is no shortage of money. This is, I find, really frustrating. There's lots of money there to be invested, but people aren't investing it in there because half the time there isn't the mechanism to do so. So, for example, you've got pension money, which sits in pension funds, which is invested very nicely around the world, nice balanced portfolio. Doesn't really help us very much.
No.
Whereas you would take some of that, not as charity money, but as good investment money, to invest in those areas where we are successful. Yes, underline, we are successful. Not will be, we are already successful. In terms of technology, we've got technology sites all around the country. All those awful nicknames of, Silicon
Roundabout,
Glen, Silicon Roundabout, all of that. And take all of those, and those are spinning out little businesses. And those little businesses can grow. And fortunately, they grow and immediately get bought up by someone in California. So, which is really rather frustrating. We can actually invest in more of those ourselves. And finally, frustrating. People saying, why don't we actually start building our own, copying what the Taiwanese are doing and building all the various chips we need to have? No, let's be developing the next set of chips, as we were doing with graphene and things like that. So it's quite within our capability. Look at the future of what we're doing, use the areas we're always successful at, and then provide the tax incentives to be able to get that investment, not just domestically, but funny enough, if successful, you get it from overseas as well.
Why, if it is so obvious to you, is it not obvious to the Chancellor of the Exchequer?
Because you're run to a great extent by civil servants who'll be saying, well, sir, well, madam, rather, this is what you can do, this is what all the alternatives you've got, here's the advice. You've then also got your political advisors behind you saying, well, actually, we need to be able to make sure we've got to get the party support behind us and all those other background issues, as opposed to people who are actually saying, look, by the way, we need to get this thing moving fast. Let's have some more dramatic ideas. I would love to actually have a politician. And to an extent, it's a bit like Farage, I suppose. It doesn't have to be him. It could easily be from the Labour Party, who throws some of the cards up in the air and say, look, let's try something a bit more dramatic here. And I don't mean like we saw with Liz Truss, which is just an irresponsible way of going about it, of saying, look, we're actually now going to getting more money into the economy. We're going to get more people actually to actually invest in this. We're going to encourage more people to be spending money in here. And we're going to be encouraging those small businesses to be growing because we're giving them tax breaks. Doesn't cost the government any money. Government only has to put up guarantees. So they pay for the guarantee if it goes wrong. If it goes right, the government earns even more money. So that's a straightforward way of trying to do that. Now, do that on a regional basis. Don't focus all on London. Do that in Birmingham, do that in Manchester, do that in Newcastle, and of course in Scotland and Ireland. And Ireland is a good example. You've got some very good high-tech operations there up in Belfast. And one of the problems they've got is they don't actually have much in the way of the mechanism to actually get more money going into it. And again, the money is there, but someone's taken the plumbing away. Put some of that plumbing back in, and you can do it. It's not that difficult.
So can I just ask you very quickly, there are two stories this morning, Daily Express this morning. This is Reeves' tax raid hurt farmers this morning. Hands off our cash. This is about the ISAs. Can I just ask you, I alluded to this at the beginning, the voting was quite mixed at the MPC. So I know you can't probably answer me this, but my understanding is that the money is now on more interest rate cuts to come. Is that right?
That is right, and there's been a significant change there, because up until now it's been, if inflation's going up, therefore you put interest rates up. That's the dogma you have. Well, hang on, inflation's going up, and we've seen interest rates coming down, and more to the point, people beginning to go the same way as we're talking about now, saying, look, actually just cut interest rates anyway, make money cheaper, that's how you'll get things moving. So there are people on that committee who got this point of view. What you need to do is actually get the bureaucrats to start understanding that and stop saying that the old dogma, the old way of going about it, is the only way to do it. There are some different ways of going about this. And as for some of the changes to ISAs and things like that, ISAs are a highly efficient way of getting people to save. We don't save enough in this country. What you should do is actually make sure that some of that ISA money can actually be put into UK businesses. They've had an idea of how to try and do that. It's a bit ham-fisted. But again, that can be easily adjusted. So, no, to keep the savings mechanisms, but also encourage those people on the committee to say, yes, keep going with this. Let us have cheaper money in the process. Cheaper money will actually feed through into cheaper mortgages, as I'm sure we're going to discuss quite soon. What can people do about their mortgages? Give themselves, hopefully, some more money or the ability to buy a bigger and better house or flat or whatever it happens to be.
Absolutely, Justin. I wish you were the Chancellor. Justin, always good to talk to you. Justin Urquhart-Stewart there, who is an economist with his cat, Betty. Let's now talk to Sally Mitchell, who's a mortgage advisor at the Mortgage Mum. Good morning, Sally.
Morning.
So, thanks ever so much for joining me this morning. So, I was trying to put Justin on the spot there about interest rates, and obviously we have seen a reduction. The MPC, as I was saying, it was quite divided this time, because some of the members wanted to have a bigger rate cut, some of them wanted to stay where we were. We now believe more interest rate cuts are coming. The big question for people is many people are coming to the end of a fixed rate mortgage. I ended mine, almost a year ago, and I got hammered by my mortgage doubling, basically, which was not ideal. Let's just say it wasn't ideal. What is your advice to people now watching what's going on, maybe people who aren't terribly financial literate but want the best deal?
Yeah, it's a really hard market to navigate because it is so volatile. We thought it would settle, a year ago. We've had another year of just up and down and swap rates going all over the place, announcements, warnings, promises, and it just hasn't happened. We're now starting to get those base rate cuts, which is fantastic if you're on a tracker, because immediately your monthly payment will change. And if you happen to be one of the 700,000 people who are on standard variable rates, you should see a reduction coming through, although it's not obligatory for the lenders to pass that on. It's the people on the fixed rates, and there are so many people coming off those historically low ones, and maybe they've been on them for 4 or 5 years. They're coming to the end, and as you said, it happened to you. I see an average of for £400 or £500 increase per month, which is just scary. And of course, in those 5 years, your life might have changed. Your job might have changed. You might have been going part-time because of maternity or paternity leave. So it's not just the extra money, it's actually, are you in a position to find that extra money? And it's causing an awful lot of stress for people, which is very, very sad. I'm glad that the decision went this way, because it feels that the Bank of England is actually looking at the economy and supporting the economy instead of just concentrating on inflation. Now, I know that's their job, but it's nice to see that they, I think, are trying to boost the economy. They've slashed the target from 1.5 to 0.75% in growth. Yeah. That's not great. They've got to do something to increase confidence, development, investment, consumer spending. And then I hope that the swap rates will calm down, because that's what drives fixed interest rates. So these reductions in the base rate don't necessarily filter through to your average fixed rate mortgage product. But if the swap rates can settle and start to come down and continue to come down, then we should see that filtering through.
Can you just explain to people in a sentence what a swap rate is?
It's basically what an institution will pay to a bigger institution to borrow money.
Right.
And then they lend that money to us.
Right, I'm with you. And so it's quite interesting. You reiterated what Justin said about there is definitely a change in tone from the Bank of England, because they are saying that the inflation is going to settle at some point. We're not going to this is what I'm reading into it. They're not going to micromanage it. And actually, Justin's point, I think, is valid, which is if you cut interest rates, then people have more free money and therefore can go out and spend it. And therefore, you grow the economy.
Exactly. It does seem fairly basic and simple, doesn't it? I mean, I know I'm totally oversimplifying, and Justin's in a much, obviously, better position to comment than me. But inflation, interestingly, is targeted to go up to 3.7% this summer because of energy costs rising again. So, what are they going to do? Are we going to hold at 4.5 and then wait to see what happens? Will there be one further cut in May before the summer increase? It's a real balancing act. To be honest, I'm glad it's not me sitting there.
Well, I was reading yesterday that maybe there won't be a cut at the next meeting, but then there will be 2 further cuts after that. As you say, literally no one has a clue. So, what do you say? I mean, I'm not putting you on the spot here, but obviously, caveat emptor, buyer beware. In terms of coming off a fixed rate, given what we're seeing and the sort of weather patterns of what is happening and the seasonal change here, do people go onto a tracker? Do they fix? I suppose it depends also how much security they want.
Yeah, it really is as individual as you are. Trackers are great if you don't want to be tied into a contract. A fixed rate is a contract. If you want to exit early, then you pay early repayment charges, ERCs, penalties.
And they can be enormous, can't they?
They can be enormous. And the more you borrow, it's a percentage, the higher they are. They can be, £8,000 to £10,000.
Whoa.
So any gain that you think you might get by being on a tracker because you're going to play the market, which is, I think, a dangerous thing to do when it's your home. I don't think people should do that necessarily. Leave that to the professionals. By fixing into a fixed rate, if you're going to want to leave it, then you could end up losing that gain by having the lower rate, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And trackers obviously are going to come down, so they're closer, but they're still higher than a fix. The average tracker for a 75% loan to value at the moment is, I think, about 4.7, 4.8. But you can get a fixed 2-year rate at the same loan to value for quite a few, not percentage points, but bips below that. So you've got to work it out. You need to go to a broker and find out what the ERC implication could be. I would say to people who are coming to the end of their fixed product to get their ducks in a row and speak to someone sooner rather than later, 6 months before. I've had clients who, because of the declining base rate, have thought if they have got any savings, actually, you know what, I'm going to overpay my mortgage and try and bring the balance down so that when I remortgage, it's not quite such a hit.
Yeah.
That can work. You can normally overpay by 10% in a calendar year. And also, the good news, not for people trying to get on the ladder, but the good news, Halifax announced their price index yesterday, and the average price of a house has increased. It has gone up. It's now 299 across the country. So when you come to look at your fixed product, check the valuation that your lender is giving you on your property.
Because it's done on loan to value.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it might be that although, yes, it's going to go up, you've dropped down a layer in their pricing, and now actually you can get a rate of 4.2 instead of 4.8. So double check that. But a good broker will be able to do that for you.
Excellent advice. Thank you ever so much. Really, really good to talk to you, Sally. Have a great day. Sally Mitchell, their mortgage advisor at the Mortgage Mama. Before her, it was Justin Urquhart-Stewart, who is an economist. Hopefully that was very useful for you if you are looking to remortgage. But as Sally said, please get advice. Don't just do it on your own. The markets are incredibly volatile at the moment. Keep all your messages coming in, please. I'm asking this morning, Labour's policies, has Labour got its spending priorities right? The number 0344 499 1000. You can send messages, which so many of you are doing, like this one from Tony. 20% of the voting age population voted for two-tier care. 80% did not. Idiots. Hi, David. I'm a working pensioner. This is Ernie. Good morning. I have no choice. The government doesn't lose any money if pensioners have to carry on working because it's taxable. And the allowance is so low, they claw it all back. Thanks, Ernie. Ginny says, I'm coming to the end of a very low fixed-rate mortgage product and I've been made redundant after 22 years. Terrifying. I'm so sorry, Ginny. And yes, you are right, but please get advice with regards to what you're doing. Also, in terms of reparations, Simon in Aberdeen says, David, all this talk about reparations, what else is going on in the background? They're trying to cover up something. Mike Fenwick says, Reform UK, it's like David Lammy, good at shouting from the sidelines. And David, your question is wrong, according to this one. Your question should really be, does anybody think Labour has got its spending priorities right? Keep all of those messages coming in, please. Still to come this morning, we have Denya's entertainment stories. Can't wait for that. Steve Denya, Virgin Radio presenter, will be with me shortly. Keep your messages, calls and thoughts coming in. This is Talk. Good morning.
So you have more of an international welfare state. And I think that the Conservatives have a great deal to answer for, especially in the last parliamentary term. Immigration skyrocketed to unprecedented levels. And Alex, all too often we were told that our immigration system attracts the brightest and the best. We have a rigorous, highly selective immigration system. And that is what people wanted, especially those who voted for Brexit back in June 2016. That was not the immigration system that was introduced.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 9:31 on Saturday, February the 8th. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. I'm asking this morning, do you think Labour has actually got its spending priorities right? Apparently we had a big fiscal black hole, 20 billion. Then, of course, we had the budget. Ooh, that's more money coming in. Now, of course, we're going to pay reparations. This is the latest big story. Just tons of cash, which we can't afford. Let me know your thoughts on all of the above, please. 0344 499 1000. So many messages, actually. Sean in Gloucester, good morning, Dr. David. Simple answer to your question. I'm asking, has Labour got their spending priorities right? Simple answer to your question. Labour haven't got anything right. They have... that's really tickled me. Excuse me. They have an uncanny knack of doing the polar opposite of right on every single issue. They want growth, so they put a customer complaints person in as Chancellor that takes money away from people. You couldn't genuinely make any of this up. Loads of other messages coming in as well. Just in terms of this, I think I said this earlier, Starmer should write a book, How to Destroy a Country in 6 months. I did that. It's Mick in Wallington, but it's still good. Lots of other messages. Joanna in Salisbury, good morning, David. The reason so many people are still voting Labour is they're the ones who got the pay rises and the union base. No other idiot would vote for them. Good morning, David. This is Anne. Good morning to you. I had Dr. Raj on this morning. I'm loving Raj. What a joy to listen to him. I could listen to him all day. Really? Lots of other messages. Keep all of those coming in, please. Has the Labour government got its spending priorities right? But now it's time for Denya's entertainment stories.
Steve Denya's Entertainment News Roundup.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm all right.
Can I start by asking a question?
Yes.
And your lovely viewers and listeners can text in. What's the greatest love song that's ever been made?
I haven't
Now,
a clue.
people will be picking love songs at their weddings, or you know, what's your favourite love song of all time? We'll loop back to this in a bit. But if you've got one, mention it and we'll read it out.
Right,
How about that?
Very
because
good.
I've got
Very
something
good.
for you in a bit. We must start the entertainment report with yet again another raft of allegations, and this time another, kind of TV chef, if you like, Gino D'Acampo. And more today, front page of The Sun, we've got Kim Woodburn, who was with him on I'm a Celebrity. This dates back to kind of 15 years ago,
right,
in 2010. So what we've got over the last 24 hours is over 40 allegations of people saying that he was sexually inappropriate and intimidating behaviour over a 12-year period on all of his TV shows. It's an ITV kind of investigation that's going down. Obviously, he is denying it. He's saying, I've never heard about this. As far as Kim's allegations go, his legal team have said, well, it's never been mentioned before, and here we are 15 years later, and now she's come out of the woodwork. So it's fascinating to see how this is going to play out. Is it, is it a pile-on? But it would seem that there are complaints and different kind of allegations coming out of virtually every TV show that he's been on.
Oh, my God, I'm just reading this copy.
Yes.
So she... Hang on. So she says he's full of himself, little pig. And obviously, as you say, she was in that camp.
Yeah.
He made her feel uncomfortable during the series by stroking his privates over his shorts.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty graphic, isn't it?
But it took 15 years for
yes, that's a very good
this
point.
to surface.
Well,
that's it. So
but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
No, not at all. So we're back to what we were saying at the end of last year regarding Greg Wallace.
Yeah.
There's a problem, isn't there? It seems within the media, and I think
well, isn't it power?
If you look closer at this, you've got freelancers who come in and work on these TV shows.
That's very
and
true.
You're 10 a penny, and if you upset people, you're out, and there's a whole raft of people who would happily take your place. And I think it's a power thing, like you say. It's a media thing. It's a power thing. You don't feel like you can complain about these things when they happen because you'll be out on your own, because you don't mean anything in these production companies. You just drafted in 0 hour
But I mean,
contracts.
certainly, when I started in television, which was about 300 years ago, that was very much the case. You didn't say anything, and there was all sorts of very abhorrent behaviour went on.
Yes.
And that was pretty much de rigueur at a particular organisation I worked at. And you're right. As when you're starting off and you're very low down in that food chain, you don't say anything.
Of course. But then what seems to happen is, as soon as there's one complaint, you'll get 30 other people. So there's a real stream of these happening, and it's just a coincidence. This is another TV chef, but this does seem very, very serious.
It does.
40 allegations, huge ITN investigation. Here's somebody that's always had this kind of happy, smiley, jokey appearance. You know, This Morning staple, for example. So a very well-known person.
Well, she's going further and saying ITV hid his behaviour and gave him a great edit to edit out his behaviour. I mean, it's pretty... it's incredibly damning.
Yeah.
And also, she's got to be pretty confident, I would have thought.
I would have said it would be more helpful if she'd said it in 2010.
Yes,
when the show...
I hear that. But at the same time, I understand the passage of time, like the Me Too stuff. It was the passage of time.
We live in different times.
We live in different times. Also, I think you then get security by knowing there are other people out there. So she's the first person to come out publicly.
Yeah.
But if you then feel you're not alone, maybe you feel it's your fault, I don't know. And then when you have more people and the group saying this happened to me or whatever, that emboldens you to speak out.
And I'm really pleased that we are living in a time when people feel safer to make these allegations, and I think it will just slowly but surely things will change now.
I mean, I think,
and things are filmed all the time now. We live in a time of social media, and there's so many on these TV shows. There's people kind of filming what goes on in the TV shows. There's backstage stuff, with I'm a Celebrity. There's an extra show now, so maybe we're just more aware, and maybe we're kinder and we're nicer. I don't know, but this doesn't look good for
I think also just going back to those days of tabloid journalism as well, the behaviour that was allowed to happen in big news organisations would not be tolerated now, would it? I mean, it's just culturally we have moved on significantly, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as I say, the environment is now calmer. It's a nicer place for people to say, hang on a minute, this has happened to me. It's not acceptable.
It's not acceptable.
I want you to look into it, and I'm not afraid to make this complaint because, in fear that I might lose my job. So watch this space as well. Everyone's talking about this. It is the front page of The Sun today.
Yeah, the headline, vile, rude and abusive, but ITV covered up for Gino. There you go. So if you want to read that, that's in The Sun. Steve, we have to go to a break, but there's so much more still to come. Like tons more still to come.
There might be some time.
There will be some time. Shall we have a cup of tea?
Yeah.
This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Breakfast 9:41, Steve Denyer in the house.
Shall we talk about some great stuff? Some stuff that, Dr. David, you've got to see this, okay? Celebrity Bear Hunt is #1 on Netflix.
We talked about this earlier.
This
I've
is
never
incredible.
heard of it.
Well, it only came out on Thursday, so give it a chance.
So what to do? Celebrities hunt bears?
So that would be more of an interesting format. So this is Holly Willoughby hosting the thing.
Oh!
And you've got a bunch of celebrities.
Right.
This is a bit like I'm a Celebrity on steroids, okay? The money they've pumped into this thing. They've taken 12 celebrities, put them in the Costa Rican jungle, and Bear Grylls has to find them and hunt them down. I've got a trailer. Can I show you?
Yes, I thought there were bears involved.
Let's look at this.
When you're put under pressure, you rise to it.
Somebody came out of me I didn't know was there.
I don't think they knew what they were signing up for.
No.
Right. Who are the celebrities?
Let me go through.
Yes.
Strictly Shirley Ballas is there. Mel B, from the Spice Girls. The Saturday singer, Una Healy.
Hang on. Shirley, Mel B.
Yeah, Boris Becker.
Wow.
Una Healy from the Saturdays, Mel B. It's actually really good. Now, they've worked out, here's the shocker, Holly Willoughby is kind of like, I suppose, the Anton Deck. So holding things together, talking to the celebrities, setting them up for what they've got to do. They've worked out this morning, big story in the Sun, that she's earned £40,000 per minute in this series. It's really glossy, and it smells of money.
It's all pre-recorded. There's no live part.
There's 8 episodes, and you find out at the end of the 8th episode who's managed to kind of evade.
And do they knock someone out every episode?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a moving story. So you need to watch it in order. Exactly like I'm a Celebrity, but a series.
So does
no live
he
action.
track... He goes after the weakest?
He goes after which ones he can track down and find. So I've got through episode 1. Look, it's really high-octane stuff, and you want to watch the next one. But I must say, isn't that amazing? Well, she's not worth 40 grand a minute.
No, she really isn't.
That is outrageous.
I'll do it.
So she's only worked 24 minutes across the 8 episodes I've worked out, and she's on air for about 180 seconds.
It's pretty similar to what you get paid at Virgin.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm just jealous. It's just a little bit more. Just a tiny bit more.
I'll do it for 40,000 a minute.
Well,
I'll do it for 30,000.
I happily carry your cases to the Costa Rican jungle if you do.
I'll do it for 10,000 a minute.
But it's #1 on Netflix. Everyone's talking about it. It's in the if you like I'm a Celebrity and you have to wait a whole year to the next season, you might want to watch this. Lots of people saying they binged the whole thing. 7 hours later.
I'm just sad there are no bears in it.
Well, let's move on after that comment. Listen, a movie that I saw yesterday. It's a big movie everyone's talking about. This is a contender for the Oscars at the beginning of March, September 5. It's about the first terrorist incident that was ever broadcast live, Munich Summer Olympic Games in 1972. I've got the trailer. Do you want to see? It's great stuff. Look at this.
Whoa.
Oh, it's great. This is a really great film. 90 minutes long, and from the second it starts, it grips you, and it reminds you that we used to live in a time, we could see any of this stuff now just by picking up our phones or looking on social media. But this was the very first occasion when ABC were in charge of presenting the sporting coverage of the Olympics, and then this terrorist attack unfolds, and they're responsible to kind of relay live what's happening and how they did it. They'd never been live showing a rolling news event. Obviously, you and I will remember the 9/11 attacks, and we'd never seen anything like that played out live. That was a big game changer. But in this movie, you go all the way back to 1972.
I had no idea they did live broadcasting in 72.
Well, they didn't up until this event, and it was so huge. It was this was the only footage of this live event. So 900 million people tuned in to watch it. It was the only way you could see this, and networks just tore up their schedules and thought, we've got to put this live to air. Now, the ABC News guys wanted to take over. The sporting people who were already on air said, no, this is our jurisdiction, we're responsible, we have our team like within the hotel,
of course,
outside the hotel. So it's this moving story about how they managed to, and they had a real problem. They said, what do we do if somebody's shot on television? Because this is live, this is real time. And also halfway through the movie, they kind of thought, the terrorists are probably looking at this. They're probably looking at the footage in the hotel
So it starts
room.
being propaganda.
Exactly that. It's just fascinating. It really is. And then it just finishes and you're like, wow, OK, so much to take in. It's the best film I've seen this year.
Really?
Really
High praise.
Really
High
is. It's
praise
great.
indeed.
Ben Chaplin, Peter Sarsgaard are in it. They were on with Chris Evans on Virgin Radio the other day talking about what it was like making that movie, and you really feel like you're back in the 70s.
And what was it called again?
It's called September 5.
September 5.
And it's about the first terrorist attack that was ever relayed live on television, 1972, and it was the Munich Summer Olympic Games. So take a look at it. As I say, only 90 minutes long. I think every movie should be 90 minutes long.
So do I. We talked about that the other week.
Popcorn just finished in the film.
And you can manage to hold on and not go to the loo.
Exactly.
Yeah, because at your age.
Perfect. You never know. You never know.
You never know.
know.
Should we move to the small box? Well, it's not a box anymore, but in my day it was a box. The television.
The television tonight. So I don't know if anyone messaged about love songs.
Yes, wait.
Should we get through some of these? The greatest love song ever made.
Okay.
I
disagree with this one. Annie Lennox, No More I Love You's. I can't.
Beautiful.
Dreadful.
Okay.
It's just squalling, caterwauling. I should be on Virgin.
This is supposed to listen to that.
Tina says George Benson, Greatest Love of All.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
That's
nice.
classy.
I like that.
Very classy.
Now, I don't know this. Our favourite love song is Wild in the Wind by David Bowie. We played it at our wedding. That's Melanie and Watford. Good morning.
Very nice.
Now, I agree with this one. One of my favourite, this is, who doesn't say who it is, one of my favourite greatest love songs, I Don't Know Much by Aaron Neville and Linda Ronstadt. I agree. I think it's a beautiful
1989
song.
that came out.
Well done.
Beautiful.
Hi, David and Steve. The greatest love song is Norma and Norman by Device Comedy. Brilliant lyrics.
Oh, Divine Comedy.
Divine Comedy.
Divine Comedy.
Norma
yeah.
and Norman.
That's a really lovely kind of.
Is it?
They're a very funny band.
Well, it's Mark and Devon who says brilliant lyrics that move me to tears every time. Great show as always. Thank you very much. Favourite love song? Unchained Melody makes me cry.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, that's number 2 in a list of the greatest love songs
Well
ever.
done, Michelle in Bristol.
Can I add one? Kate Bush. This woman's work is just such a beautiful song. Kate Bush, This Woman's Work, listen to it. I guarantee you will at least well up.
Can I do some more? This is very good. Oh, Dan in Kent, Love Lift Us Up Where We Belong, Officer and a Gentleman. Dance. Oh, but dance. Hang on a minute. This is Kate in Warwickshire. Good morning. Morning, David. Best love song is "Dance Me to the End of Love" by Leonard Cohen. No contest. Do you know that one?
Okay.
Do you know that one?
No. Well, listen, there's Heartbreakers, there's Love Songs. It's a Love Songs night on BBC Two tonight. The top 5 of all time. Whitney Houston, I Will Always Love You. Will Young, Anything Is Possible. It's number 5, actually.
5, I see, yeah. 4.
4.
3.
Who's 3? This is the most messed up chart I've ever done. Number 4 is Will Young, Anything Is Possible. Number 3 is Bryan Adams, Everything I Do It For You. Robson and Jerome, Unchained Melodies in there as well. There you go.
Who was 1?
No,
you're not telling me that.
Lost my...
Well, we'll go to a break. You can tell me after the break. Keep those messages coming in. Favourite love songs, please. Evergreen by Barbara Streisand.
Nice.
That's Andy in Bridgend. I'll keep the others for after the break.
Okay.
This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this Parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence. She has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk. Steve Denyer is with me. We're talking. Good morning. We're talking about greatest love songs.
We've got loads, haven't we?
I agree with this one. Graham in Welling, Dance with My Father.
Luther Vandross.
Yeah. That's very. Oh, it's a beautiful song. That. The Righteous Brothers, Unchained Melody.
Yep.
Please the Original. That's Bernie. Kev. Good morning, Dr. Ball. Those Were the Days of Our Lives by Freddie Mercury. I would agree with that.
That was the last ever video.
It's one of the best love songs out there.
Yeah.
It was also my grand's favourite song. That's Kev in Ripley in Derbyshire. The Power of Love by Frankie Goes to Hollywood. That's Debs in Lincolnshire. Good morning to you. Elton John, The Bitch Is Back. I don't think that's a love song.
Well, it could be if you don't like someone.
That's also true. Good morning, Dr. David. Very good. Good morning. What's this one? Best love song for me is Wave by David Sylvian. Great show. Best wishes, Sarah and Devon. I do not know that.
The number one on the chart that I couldn't find is Wet, Wet, Wet Love. I found it now. Wet, Wet, Wet Love is all around from Four Weddings, isn't it? Four Weddings and a Funeral. It was huge, wasn't it? It was like the Bryan Adams.
They were like number one for about 26 weeks or something.
They were like very similar to Bryan Adams. Everything I Do. Go on.
Yeah, no, you're right. It was like, and this week's chart.
Yeah,
that was the same as last week.
What about Cyndi Lauper?
Girls Just Want to Have Fun, 1983.
True Colours.
Rubbish.
Time After Time.
Yeah.
No? OK, so you won't be seeing her this week.
I know she's your mate.
She has, she's rocked up to the UK.
Oh,
so
right.
Cyndi Lauper's 71.
Right.
She's had a 40-year career.
Crikey.
It's incredible, isn't it? And she's playing the OVO in Glasgow tonight and Manchester's
I thought you said she was playing the oboe.
She might be. The great thing about Cyndi Lauper, if you go to see the show, I cannot wait to see this, is the farewell show. Some of her stories are longer than the songs involved.
Right.
And you think, is there a punchline to this story? And it turns out most of the time, no.
And any gig, just very quickly.
Just Cyndi Lauper.
Just Cyndi Lauper, right.
Glasgow, Manchester.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Good morning, Peter.
That was showbiz, Steve, to another.
Yeah, well, quite. What's your favourite love song?
Favourite love song is A Case of You by Joni Mitchell.
Wow.
What?
That was a tumbleweed.
That was good. No, good. I mean, I would have. I don't know is the honest answer.
Remember that time you told me love was touching souls?
I don't remember telling you that.
Surely you touched mine. That's what Joni Mitchell said.
Absolutely. Wow. Okay. Well done. Good recovery from my question. I thought that was very good. By the way, the greatest love song on here apparently, "Birds of a Feather," Billie Eilish. Don't know about that. Love Lana Del Rey. Anyway, let's stay together, Al Green.
Okay.
Okay.
I was wondering.
What's coming up?
Well, should we pay slavery reparations?
We've been talking about
story
that.
We're talking about today. I know you've been talking about it this morning. We'll be asking that question.
I didn't think we had any money.
Well, we don't have any money,
Right.
so let's give our money away to people abroad for things that may or may not have happened hundreds of years ago.
Great.
To people who may or may not have been their relatives. What if you're like? What if you have a bit of that heritage? If you're like, you know, if you're 25% of a certain heritage, should you get 25% of the money? We'll talk about all those kind of issues. Also, fascinating one on universities as well. I don't know if you've seen this story. Yeah, in regard to, I mean, this is absolutely shocking. Now, what they want is that 60% of the funding is due to the research. Now it'll be down to 50% and 25% on
DEI.
diversity,
but at the
equity,
same time,
inclusion.
and then you've got the FT this morning, Accenture being another one that ditches DEI. Because, so they're going completely in the face of everything else that's
and a lot of these businesses ditching DEI and also ESG as well, and environment, social and governance. A lot lot of businesses moving away from that as well. So we'll talk about that. We'll also, on the debate desk, we'll be talking about Labour councils. There's a big one yesterday. We took 19 calls on Drive yesterday about, not all about these, but mostly about councils banning mourners from laying flowers
I was
on
going
graves.
to do that this morning. So you can put flowers on there for a week.
Yes, you can, and then after 7 days they're taken away. It's ridiculous.
Shouldn't
and
they
after
empty
that
the
point,
bins? Shouldn't they be doing council-y things?
Shouldn't they be filling the potholes and emptying the
Yes,
bins?
there's another one.
And
Yeah.
those sorts of things, yes. Also, Starmer taking the fight to reform, videos of migrant deportations. We'll be talking about Rachel Reeves's position, looking a bit dodgy.
Is it?
And yeah, it is. And as the 7th of October was happening, as the actual attacks by Hamas terrorists, horrendous attacks were happening, what was happening in London? A phone call was made to the Metropolitan Police by pro-Palestinian activists planning a protest for the next week because they knew they needed 7 days' notice in order to do it. As Israelis were being raped, murdered, burned,